Chapter 1359. Song Jianguang rejected without hesitation. How could he watch as Tang Zheng went to Fengdu? That was King Yanluo's base camp. It wasn't easy for him to get on the good side of Tang Zheng, so how could he let his enemy, King Yanluo, take advantage of him? Seeing Song Jianguang's reaction, the Chakravarti king felt relieved. He retorted, "This is Tang Zheng's decision, not yours. Do you want to restrict his freedom as well?" The Chakravarti king wasn't an idiot. He took the opportunity to sow discord between Song Jianguang and Tang Zheng. Song Jianguang was stunned. He hurriedly defended himself. "Of course I won't restrict his freedom. Then we'll listen to his decision," the Chakravarti king said. Instantly, all eyes were focused on Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was thinking. He was pressed for time. Although Li Xiaotian's body wouldn't be damaged after he performed his arts, too much time could be wasted. Therefore, he was racing against time, seizing every second. The King Yanluo definitely had the most important clue. This was like a puzzle. Without the most important clue, he wouldn't be able to find Dizang of Goguryeo. Therefore, this trip to Fengdu was imperative. Even if the Chakravarti king didn't mention it, he had to go. Song Jianguang could refuse, but he couldn't. Therefore, he looked deeply into Song Jianguang's eyes. Song Jianguang's heart sank. He understood Tang Zheng's decision from the look in his eyes. He sighed inwardly, knowing that he couldn't stop him. "Song Jianguang, thank you for your good intentions, but I must go on this trip to Fengdu," Tang Zheng said resolutely. Song Jianguang nodded slowly. Understood. Seeing this, the Chakravarti king and the others were secretly delighted. They had finally disrupted Song Jianguang's plan. The King Yanluo would definitely praise them when he found out. But suddenly, Song Jianguang raised his voice and said, "For your safety, I'll go with you." Song Jianguang was going to Fengdu too. The other Yama kings were all shocked, and they stared at Song Jianguang in disbelief. However, the resolute look on Song Jianguang's face clearly indicated that he wasn't joking. He had really risked his life for Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng looked at Song Jianguang with a burning gaze. At this moment, his good impression of him multiplied. He was very clear about the situation in the ghost realm and was not willing to let Song Jianguang take the risk. He said, "No need, I am not someone who will be trampled on by others. If someone really wants to harm me, I will make them pay a painful price." The Chakravarti king hurriedly said, "You worry too much. Fengdu city is the safest place. It will definitely protect you and prevent those with ulterior motives from harming you." Song Jianguang snorted coldly and said, "You're the ones with ulterior motives, right?" Tang Zheng was like Tang Sanzang's meat, a delicious cake. All forces in the world of spirits and souls wanted to rope him in. Even for the king of hell, although he secretly hated Tang Zheng to the bone, if he could rope him in, the king of hell would definitely spare no effort. This was the transcendent status of Tang Zheng. "We'll go too." This kind of thing naturally needs to be witnessed by everyone. King Qingguang and the others agreed. They did not want Song Jianguang to go alone and take the risk. Song Jianguang nodded heavily and agreed with their decision. Tang Zheng did not try to persuade them anymore and said, "Since that's the case, there's no time to lose. Let's go to Fengdu city now." The teleportation array opened and Tang Zheng held Li Xiaotian's hand and disappeared with the other kings of hell. The next moment, they were standing in Fengdu city. Apart from Song Jianguang, the other kings of hell secretly sized up Li Xiaotian and recognized that she was a living soul. They guessed that Tang Zheng's trip to the ghost realm was related to this living soul. Tang Zheng did not say that he wanted to bring her back to life. Song Jianguang did not have a way, and he did not expect the other kings of hell to have a way. In the Yama palace, King Yama had been waiting for a long time. When he saw everyone walking over, he took 3 steps forward and arrived in front of Tang Zheng. He enthusiastically held his hand, as if they were good friends who had not seen each other for a long time. This made Tang Zheng almost have an illusion. He couldn't help but sigh that King Yama was indeed not an ordinary person. No wonder he could command a region. Ha ha ha, the arrival of an esteemed guest truly brings light to Fengdu City. I often miss you since we parted that day. King Yama said insincerely. Tang Jing smiled awkwardly and said, this time, I have a request. Between you and me, there is no need to use the word request. If there is anything, just say it. I will do my best to complete it for you. King Yama said enthusiastically. He glanced at Song Jiangwang from the corner of his eye, as if to say that if you can pull strings with Tang Jing, can't I? Song Jiangwang secretly hated him, but there was nothing he could do. I want to find Dizang of Goguryeo. I heard that you have clues, so I need this clue. Tang Jing went straight to the point. What's this? King Yama said casually, when I heard the news of you coming to the ghost realm, I thought that King Song Jiangwang was deliberately mystifying things, so I ignored it. Otherwise, I would definitely go to Songjiang City to see you. Why would I make you go through the trouble of coming to Fengdu City? Song Jiangwang snorted coldly and said, speaking of which, who doesn't know what you're thinking? King Yama pretended not to hear it and automatically filtered it out. He said enthusiastically, you want to find Dizang of Goguryeo. Actually, I also want to find him. After all, there are too many things in the ghost realm, and many things still require him, the master of the realm, to make the decision. After pausing for a moment, he continued, it's just that King Song Jiangwang and I have too many differences. I've wanted to cooperate with him several times to find Dizang of Goguryeo, but he didn't agree. King Yama, when did you find me to cooperate? King Song Jiangwang immediately retorted. King Yama smiled and didn't argue with him. He continued to say, now that you're here, of course I'm willing to give you the relevant clues. As for the others, I can't control them. King Yama took the initiative to gain the upper hand. As expected of the master of Fengdu City, he quickly turned the situation around. Only then did King Song Jiangwang realize that he had underestimated King Yama. Everyone knew that King Song Jiangwang was resourceful, but now it seemed that King Yama was not to be outdone. King Song Jiangwang raised his head high and said, King Yama, don't say such empty words. Whoever is not willing to share the relevant information with Tang Zheng is my enemy. I will definitely seek justice for Tang Zheng. Sure, if anyone doesn't share, they will also be my enemy. I will never agree. King Yama said without showing any weakness. Since the two kings of hell had agreed, the other kings of hell naturally wouldn't have any objections. They all took the initiative to share their information. In fact, the information in their hands had already been shared with King Yama or King Song Jiangwang. The relevant information was immediately gathered together. Not long after, there was a general result. Everyone focused on the result. King Yama and King Song Jiangwang raised their heads at the same time. They were the first to see the clues and came to a conclusion. So that's how it is. So that's how it is. The two of them said at the same time. Tang Zheng was an outsider and didn't know much about the ghost realm. He didn't see any clues and asked curiously, how is it? King Song Jiangwang couldn't wait and said, Dizang of Goguryeo's whereabouts have come out. Then where is he? Eye of Samsara. Eye of Samsara? Tang Zheng frowned in surprise. He had never heard of this place before, but in the ghost realm, this was a well-known place. Because this was the place where the ghosts of the ghost realm reincarnated. It was a public area that didn't belong to any of the 10 kings of hell. Once the 10 kings of hell decided which ghosts wanted to reincarnate, these ghosts would be sent to the Eye of Samsara and reincarnate in the human world. This was a place under the eyes of all the kings of hell, but it was also the place that was most easily ignored. Because this place didn't belong to any king of hell, it had been like this since the moment the ghost realm was formed. Therefore, no king of hell paid too much attention to the Eye of Samsara. They never thought that they would spend so much effort to search for clues everywhere. In the end, the Dizang of Goguryeo was right under their noses. This was really a case of darkness under the light. The kings of hell had complicated feelings, but another question popped up. Why did the Dizang of Goguryeo go missing and run to the Eye of Samsara? If he wanted to save all living beings in the ghost realm, shouldn't he be in various cities? The Eye of Samsara was to be reincarnated in the human world. What was the use of going there? They couldn't figure it out no matter how hard they racked their brains. Perhaps only by finding Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva would they be able to solve this mystery and obtain the answer. Tang Jing didn't care about this. Since he had found the whereabouts of the Dizang of Goguryeo, of course he couldn't wait to see him. The others had the same thoughts, so they hit it off. Li Xiaotian's eyes also lit up with hope. She looked at Tang Zheng with sparkling eyes. Tang Zheng held her hand tightly and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, there will definitely be a way." King Yanluo had been sizing up Li Xiaotian. Other than seeing that she was a living soul, he didn't find any other useful information. He couldn't help but feel puzzled. Taking advantage of the gap when everyone was walking towards the teleportation array, he asked curiously, "Tang Zheng, I haven't asked what relationship this lady has with you?" Tang Zheng looked at Li Xiaotian affectionately and said, "She is my lover." Lover. Li Xiaotian couldn't help but stop in her tracks. She looked at Tang Zheng with burning eyes. She was extremely excited, as if she had thousands of words to say, but they were stuck in her chest and she couldn't say a single word. She had the urge to cry. These two words meant too much. It was a kind of recognition. She didn't expect him to say it out loud like this. This was a kind of affirmation and recognition for her. Tang Zheng saw through her mood and held her hand even tighter. When the kings of hell heard this, their hearts trembled. They didn't expect this living soul to be his lover. They didn't guess wrong. The purpose of Tang Zheng's trip was definitely related to her. "It's a pity that your lover has left you. But don't worry, she will receive the best care in the ghost realm." King Yanluo hurriedly expressed his stance. His words could indeed give a living soul the best treatment and all kinds of privileges in the ghost realm. Tang Zheng shook his head. "Thank you for your good intentions, but she doesn't need this." King Yanluo was stunned. A living soul didn't need his care. Could it be that King Song Jiangwang had promised him more benefits? "Don't worry, no matter what King Song Jiangwang promises you, I can do it." King Yanluo didn't want all the credit to be snatched away by King Song Jiangwang, so he quickly added. King Song Jiangwang looked at King Yanluo in ridicule, thinking that your flattery had hit the nail on the head. King Yanluo's heart skipped a beat. Could it be that he had made a mistake? Tang Zheng shook his head and didn't say a word. When the other kings of hell saw this, they didn't dare to ask. Chapter 1360. The Eye of Reincarnation, a huge whirlpool that looked like an eye was suspended in the air, attracting everyone's attention. Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian were also deeply attracted by this scene, staring at the huge eye at the same time. There were several long lines around the Eye of Reincarnation, all of them were ghosts. Under the arrangement of the ghost messengers and ghost generals, they all entered the Eye of Reincarnation. Swish! A green light fell from the Eye of Reincarnation, enveloping the ghosts below. A burst of Sanskrit suddenly sounded, like heavenly music, making people feel relaxed and happy. A huge golden Sanskrit character flew down from the Eye of Reincarnation and imprinted on the forehead of the ghost. The golden light flashed and the ghost was absorbed into the Eye of Reincarnation, disappearing without a trace. "Huh!" The 10 kings of hell exclaimed, looking at the Eye of Reincarnation with shining eyes. Shock appeared in their eyes. Why is there a golden Sanskrit character? King Yanluo finally couldn't help but blurt out. "That's right, how could the Eye of Reincarnation have such a thing? It didn't have it before." King Song Jiangwang also found it hard to believe. Tang Zheng's heart moved, recalling the golden Sanskrit character, which belonged to the same lineage as his own Ksitigarbha Sutra. Could it be the doing of the Dizang of Goguryeo? The 10 kings of hell weren't idiots, they immediately thought of this possibility. Where is the Dizang of Goguryeo? They suddenly had an ominous premonition. They couldn't wait to find the Dizang of Goguryeo and ask him what was going on. King Yenluo suddenly grabbed a ghost general who walked past him and asked sternly, "Stop, I'm asking you a question." The ghost general looked at him with a normal expression and asked, "What's the matter?" "What's the matter?" King Yenluo felt that this was too strange. Was there anyone in the ghost realm who didn't know him? Seeing him in front of them, they didn't kneel down to pay their respects, but instead asked him so casually. Strange. All of this was filled with strangeness. If it was in the past, not to mention the 10 kings of hell, as long as any of the kings of hell came here, those ghost messengers would stop what they were doing and come forward to pay their respects. But this time, they had mobilized so many Yama kings, yet not a single one of them came forward to pay their respects. This was extremely strange. The other kings of hell also noticed this, and they stared intently at the ghost general in front of them. However, the ghost general's expression was calm, and he didn't show the slightest hint of fear. "Don't you recognize me?" King Yama took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. "You are the king of hell," the ghost general indifferently said. "You know me, yet you dare to be so disrespectful." These words had undoubtedly poked at King Yenluo's sore spot. Qin Yi had brazenly declared that he knew him, yet he still dared to treat him in such a manner. Was he courting death? All living things are equal. Whether you are the king of hell or someone else, you are all the same in my eyes, the ghost general calmly said. All living beings are equal. Everyone muttered these words and sucked in a breath of cold air as a chill rose in their hearts. They couldn't be more familiar with these words. Wasn't this what the Dizang of Goguryeo had been repeating? The Dizang of Goguryeo had always wanted to deliver all living things from torment, and realize his great wish of equality. However, this was snatching food from the pot of the 10 kings of hell, so how could he agree? All kinds of hypocrisy and civility, and secretly obstructed the Dizang of Goguryeo's plan. Never in their wildest dreams would they have thought that they would actually meet someone who had been truly converted by the Dizang of Goguryeo in the eye of reincarnation. They had always thought that the Dizang of Goguryeo had long since given up on this plan. Who would have thought that he would find another way, and actually carry out his plan in a place that even the 10 kings of hell hadn't noticed? They subconsciously glanced at the other ghost generals and ghost envoys. Their expressions were exactly the same as the ghost generals. Could it be that they had all been converted by the Dizang of Goguryeo? At this moment, another ghost stood in the eye of reincarnation. The green light descended, and so did the golden Sanskrit characters. Everyone stared at the golden Sanskrit characters at the same time. Suddenly, they realized something and shouted, "The Dizang of Goguryeo must be here." The previous clues only indicated that the Dizang of Goguryeo might be here, but after seeing this scene, they immediately came to this conclusion. The ghost general didn't continue to speak with the king of hell. He turned around and returned to his post. Seeing that he actually dared to turn around and leave, the king of hell became even angrier. He reached out his hand and enveloped the ghost general. He shouted, "How dare you be so impudent!" Whoosh! The ghost general's strength was no match for the king of hell's ghost hand. He flew back towards the king of hell, but he didn't panic. Instead, he was incomparably calm, as if all of this had nothing to do with him. The king of hell didn't see the scene he had expected. He became even angrier, thinking that this was a serious provocation to him. Thus, he grabbed with his finger, and an invisible force contracted inwards, as if wanting to crush the ghost general into pieces. Suddenly, the ghost general stopped in midair and didn't continue to fly towards the king of hell. The ghost general was safe and sound. He didn't shatter into pieces. Instead, he slowly descended and steadily landed on the ground. This wasn't the king of hell being merciful. Everyone saw this and was shocked. They looked around, but didn't see any suspicious people. The king of hell was extremely angry. No matter how hard he tried, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. It had no effect at all. He could only watch as the ghost general was not far away, but he couldn't hurt him at all. This kind of situation had never happened before. Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian watched this scene attentively. Li Xiaotian whispered, "What's going on?" Tang Zheng slightly shook his head and thoughtfully said, "It seems that the situation in the ghost realm is more complicated than I thought. The 10 kings of hell have encountered a big problem." "What big problem?" "A big problem related to their status." Li Xiaotian didn't really understand. For a moment, he wanted to ask for an explanation, but he found that the situation had changed greatly. The Ghost General had already broken free from the King of Hell's control and regained his freedom. He quickly retreated and immediately immersed himself in his work. It was as if nothing had happened and he wasn't affected at all. One after another, ghosts stood in the eye of reincarnation and were sucked into it in an orderly manner. This silent scene seemed to have a huge force that fiercely attacked the nerves of the 10 kings of hell. Finally, they couldn't take it anymore and rushed in. They interrupted the eye of reincarnation and shouted, "Dizang of Goguryeo, where are you? Hurry up and come out." The world instantly quieted down. It was so quiet that it was frightening. The cold wind blew and the cold air seemed to blow into the hearts of the 10 kings of hell. Tang Zheng seemed to have sensed something and looked towards the eye of reincarnation. Li Xiaotian also followed his gaze and asked, "Did you sense something?" Tang Zheng slightly nodded. He cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra and did sense a familiar energy spreading out from the eye of reincarnation. Whoosh! Sure enough, a golden light spread out from the eye of reincarnation. In an instant, the world was bathed in golden light. This immediately attracted everyone's attention. Those ghost generals were like devout believers. They immediately put their palms together and chanted Buddha's name. The golden light became even brighter. In an instant, this place didn't seem to be the ghost realm, but another world. This illusion made the hearts of the 10 kings of hell fall to the bottom. They looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The golden light of the eye of reincarnation became stronger and stronger. Finally, a lotus throne gradually appeared. A person sat on it with a solemn appearance. Just a glance was enough to shake one's heart. Dizang of Goguryeo. Exclamations sounded one after another as they stared at the figure in the golden light. Who else could it be but the Dizang of Goguryeo? Tang Zheng was pleasantly surprised. He finally found the Dizang of Goguryeo. There was hope for Li Xiaotian's revival. He subconsciously clenched Li Xiaotian's hand. Li Xiaotian felt the change in him, and her heart also tensed up. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva also chanted the name of Buddha, which resonated with the names of the ghost soldiers and ghost messengers. The 10 kings of hell's expression became gloomy and ugly. Even King Song Jiangwang, the king of hell who had always wanted to build a good relationship with Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, had a solemn expression on his face as he stared at Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. King Yenluo pondered for a moment and finally asked, "Dizang of Goguryeo, what are you doing? Don't you need to give us an explanation?" In fact, the 10 kings of hell had already seen through the actions of the Dizang of Goguryeo. He had converted the ghost messengers and ghost generals of the eye of reincarnation. They were no longer the subordinates of any of the kings of hell. However, they had a doubt in their hearts. After all, there were too few ghost messengers and ghost generals here. What was the use of the Dizang of Goguryeo converting so few ghost messengers and ghost generals? There must be a deeper reason for the Dizang of Goguryeo to do this. It was just that they had not discovered it yet. The Dizang of Goguryeo looked at the furious 10 kings of hell and was not frightened. He was still as calm as before as he slowly said, "To save all living beings and to reform all living beings. This is my life's great wish. What I am doing now is to achieve my great wish." "Your great wish? Humph, you make it sound nice. You are harming others for your own benefit, do you know that?" King Yenluo did not care about angering the Dizang of Goguryeo, because he already felt that he was in imminent danger. Harming others for my own benefit? Hee, what good does this do for me? King Yenluo was not angry and sneered. These guys all listen to your orders. If this is not harming others for your own benefit, then what is it? King Yenluo asked aggressively. Who said that they listened to my orders? Isn't that so? The Dizang of Goguryeo chanted the name of Buddha and shook his head with a sigh. No, you are wrong. They are listening to their own hearts, not me. Listening to their own hearts? The 10 kings of hell felt that these words were like a fantasy story, unreasonable. In their view, subordinates obey their superiors and ultimately listen to their orders. This was the truth. Listening to one's own heart, wasn't this nonsense? It was really unheard of. What kind of people were the 10 kings of hell? Of course, they would not be moved by these words. They all stared at the Dizang of Goguryeo with unkind expressions and said, "You are destroying the foundation of the ghost realm and will cause chaos in the ghost realm. At that time, you will not be the one to save all living beings and bring them a peaceful life. Instead, you will bring them endless suffering. This does not depend on me, but on all of you." The Dizang of Goguryeo was not intimidated by these threats. The king of hell's meaning could not be more obvious. Chapter 1361. Dizang of Goguryeo naturally understood the intentions of the 10 kings of hell, but he did not give in. He said solemnly, "The peace and stability of the ghost realm cannot be destroyed. If anyone dares to violate the universal condemnation, they will be punished accordingly." Dizang of Goguryeo had the heart of a bodhisattva, but he also had the courage of a Vajra. He would not be threatened by the kings of hell. These words made the 10 kings of hell stunned as they stared at him blankly. But who were the 10 kings of hell? Naturally, they would not compromise. They looked at each other and said resolutely, "Do you dare to kill all of us kings of hell? The sea of bitterness is boundless, repent and the shore is at hand. If we are lost, I don't mind doing so." I think the beings of the ghost realm would also like to see this scene. Dizang of Goguryeo pondered for a while and said. The pupils of the 10 kings of hell shrank. They did not expect the Dizang of Goguryeo to be so resolute, as if he had made up his mind. In fact, Dizang of Goguryeo also knew that the 10 kings of hell were not lying. If he really wanted to get rid of the 10 kings of hell, the ghost realm would be in chaos. After all, they had been operating for so many years, it would not be so easy for them to fall apart. But one thing was certain. The Dizang of Goguryeo and the 10 kings of hell were well aware of this point. Once this period of chaos was over, the ghost realm would eventually return to peace and harmony. It might even be more peaceful than it was now. After all, no one wanted someone to ride on their head, and even more so, did not want their fate to be in the hands of others. The Dizang of Goguryeo's promotion of equality was undoubtedly their gospel, and could remove the shackles on their bodies. The beings of the ghost realm were happy to see this happen. The 10 kings of hell looked at each other. For a moment, they did not know how to respond. Song Jiangwang was resourceful and had an idea. He looked at the eye of reincarnation and said, "Dizang of Goguryeo, you didn't come here just to save these ghost messengers and ghost generals, did you?" "That's right, how could I forget this?" The hearts of the other kings of hell immediately lit up, and they all turned to Dizang of Goguryeo with unblinking eyes. Every king of hell had this question in their hearts, but they were completely confused by the question thrown by Dizang of Goguryeo. For a moment, they didn't think of this crucial point. Dizang of Goguryeo stared deeply at Song Jiangwang. Surprisingly, he did not hide anything and said honestly, "What I do is, of course, to deliver all living beings from torment." Song Jiangwang pointed and said, "Could it be that this is what you're referring to? This doesn't sound like the great ambition of Dizang of Goguryeo." "Of course not." Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head and said meaningfully, "I want to convert all living beings under the heavens. Although they are one of them, they are too few." The hearts of the 10 kings of hell trembled. Song Jiangwang seemed to have caught onto something and impatiently asked, "Then how are you going to convert all living beings under the heavens?" Dizang of Goguryeo gave an enigmatic smile. The smile at the corner of his mouth was like 10 miles of spring wind, making people feel relaxed and happy. Tang Zheng and Li Xiaotian had this kind of feeling, especially Li Xiaotian. His soul seemed to have been strengthened and he enjoyed this feeling very much. For a moment, Tang Zheng had no choice but to temporarily suppress his purpose of coming here. He quietly looked at the two sides who were at daggers drawn. Dizang of Goguryeo pointed to the eye of reincarnation in the sky and said, "The souls reincarnated from here have already been baptized by the Ksitigarbha Sutra and have been converted. The concept of all living beings being equal will be rooted in their souls. Whether they reincarnate as humans or die in the future, this concept will always accompany them." The 10 kings of hell seemed to have heard something extremely terrifying. They were all moved and turned pale with fright. They cried out involuntarily, You actually have this plan. This is really a good plan." Everyone was shocked by this plan. Tang Zheng was also shocked and asked, "Doesn't that mean that when they are reincarnated as humans, the belief of all living beings being equal will also accompany them when they are in the human world?" Dizang of Goguryeo had already seen Tang Zheng. Although he did not understand the purpose of his visit, he still nodded in a friendly manner and said, "Yes." Tang Zheng also realized the huge changes this would bring. It would not only affect the ghost world but also the human world. From then on, the new generation born would not recognize the existing rules of the world. They would believe in the equality of all living beings. At that time, the original world system would be completely destroyed, and it would also cause chaos. Tang Zheng realized the seriousness of the problem, and his face could not help but change greatly. In fact, as a person of the new era, he also understood the great significance of all living beings being equal. But how could there be such a good thing in the world? This kind of change would definitely be accompanied by bloody sacrifices. This was something he did not want to see. If all living beings were really equal, then the world structure would change greatly. Even countries would not exist. He did not even dare to imagine that scene. King Yenluo had an idea, as if he had discovered a new continent. He looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze and said, "Tang Zheng, now you know the serious consequences of his plan. Not only will it cause chaos in the ghost world, even your human world will not be spared." Song Jiangwang also nodded. He was someone who had vested interests, so of course he did not want his privileges to go down the drain. At least on this matter, the 10 kings of hell had a common request and reached a unified opinion. Dizang of Goguryeo did not care about King Yenluo's attempt to sow discord. Instead, he stared kindly at Tang Zheng and said, "Tang Zheng, you cultivate the Ksitigarbha Sutra, so you should understand my good intentions." Tang Zheng pondered for a moment and secretly nodded, "I understand." Of course he understood the great significance of all this. If this was really realized, then perhaps there would be no more disputes in this world, no more bloodshed, and it would be a paradise. The paradise that was mentioned in the Ksitigarbha Sutra might be like this. Although Li Xiaotian did not understand Dizang of Goguryeo and the ghost world, she still vaguely understood 70 to 80% of it. Her expression changed greatly as she grabbed Tang Zheng's hand and slightly shook her head, saying, "No, this will not work." Dizang of Goguryeo asked doubtfully, "Why?" Someone questioned his great ambition, so he naturally wanted to know the reason. Li Xiaotian raised her head and stared at Dizang of Goguryeo in a daze, hesitating. Tang Zheng knew that Li Xiaotian was resourceful and meticulous. Every word and action of hers had a deep meaning, so she would not speak carelessly to him. Thus, he patted her hand and encouraged her, "If you have any ideas, boldly say it." Although he agreed with Dizang of Goguryeo's great ambition, and this was definitely a good starting point, he also understood that it would cause a lot of chaos and even sacrifice. Thus, for a moment, he did not know how to choose. Listening to Li Xiaotian's point of view was a good idea. Li Xiaotian glanced at Tang Zheng and was encouraged by him. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward and bowed to Dizang of Goguryeo, saying, "This is just a small opinion of mine. If there is anything wrong, please forgive me." Seeing that Tang Zheng's companion actually rejected Dizang of Goguryeo's point of view, the 10 kings of hell's eyes lit up. They were all full of interest and could not wait to hear her opinion. She was the girl that Tang Zheng loved. If she could persuade Tang Zheng, then Tang Zheng could stand on their side and persuade Dizang of Goguryeo, then they could avoid a huge dispute. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva smiled amiably, looking like he was all ears. He was not angry. If he could not even persuade a living soul, then his so-called deliverance of all living beings would be like the moon in the water. Therefore, he wanted to convert this living soul. Although the world of spirits and the human world are two different worlds, along the way, although I have not seen much, my feelings are very deep. There are many similarities between the two worlds, there is no doubt about this. Li Xiaotian was not a person who had stage fright. After calming her mind, she spoke frankly with assurance. When the others heard this, they nodded and agreed with her conclusion of observation. Since there are similarities, then the world of spirits and souls can also be judged by the human world's experience. There were all kinds of strange people in the world. Every person was an individual with their own unique way of thinking. In this world, there will never be two people who are exactly the same. Even if their appearance is the same, their thoughts will definitely be completely different. Li Xiaotian was naturally intelligent and had enough understanding of human nature. Otherwise, she would not be able to lead the Li Palace. It is precisely because of this unique characteristic that humans will have selfish desires and different identities. This different identity will inevitably cause all living beings to be unable to be equal. Dizang of Goguryeo listened quietly and retorted, "It is true that humans have selfish desires, but a soul that has experienced the Ksitigarbha scripture's conversion can overcome this selfish desire and thus strengthen the belief that all living beings are equal." Li Xiaotian still stubbornly shook her head and said resolutely, "Impossible. There is no such thing as complete fairness in this world, and even more so, there will not be a person who is completely fair. In fact, in human history, there have been people who have dreamed of establishing such a society, but in the end, they all failed. Because, this is against human nature." Against human nature? Dizang of Goguryeo frowned. These 3 words were without a doubt a very serious accusation, almost rejecting his grand wish from the very foundation. When the 10 kings of hell heard this, they were all overjoyed. This girl had a sharp tongue, and the words of an outsider were worth 10,000 of their words. Because she did not have any vested interests, her words were more persuasive than the 10 kings of hell. Tang Zheng fell into deep thought. Li Xiaotian's words were like pouring wisdom into his head, making him suddenly see the light, as if a light had lit up his heart. Since he started cultivating the Ksitigarbha scripture, many of his thoughts had gradually leaned towards the Dizang of Goguryeo. Therefore, when the Dizang of Goguryeo raised this grand wish, although he knew that there would definitely be hope, he did not oppose it. But after all, he was someone who had lived in the human world for nearly 20 years, and his daily experience was very profound. Especially after Li Xiaotian's advice, his feelings were the most intense. Li Xiaotian seemed to be excited as she continued, "Your plan seems perfect, and the starting point is also very good. It is for the sake of all living beings, but it is a castle in the air. It seems perfect, but the foundation is not stable, and in the end, it will fall short of success." Li Xiaotian dared to say that, and these words completely rejected the hundreds and thousands of grand wishes of the Dizang of Goguryeo. This was undoubtedly a huge blow and challenge. When she finished speaking, there was complete silence. No one objected, and no one agreed. Instead, the 10 kings of hell looked at her with a trace of respect and gratitude. Dizang of Goguryeo's solemn expression changed for the first time. His eyes narrowed slightly, and his gaze fluctuated incessantly as he looked straight at Li Xiaotian. Chapter 1362. Li Xiaotian met Dizang of Goguryeo's gaze without a trace of fear. These were her heartfelt words. She admired Dizang of Goguryeo for having such a great ambition, but she did not believe that it could be realized. Tang Zheng understood Li Xiaotian. Looking at her firm eyes, his heart stirred, as if he was infected by these words. The 10 kings of hell almost cheered. These words were more convincing than if they had said it themselves. Because this was said by an unrelated person, she was not a person with vested interests. Dizang of Goguryeo's expression kept changing. He looked straight at Li Xiaotian and said, "Do you really think that my great ambition is a castle in the air?" "Yes." Looking like Dizang of Goguryeo's imposing manner, Li Xiaotian took a deep breath and insisted on her point of view. Dizang of Goguryeo did not get angry. He muttered, "I will prove that you are wrong." "How will you prove it?" The others also looked at Dizang of Goguryeo curiously, not knowing how he would prove it. "You are a living soul. You will witness how I achieve all of this in the ghost realm," Dizang of Goguryeo said without hesitation. Song Jianguang's heart moved. He quickly turned his head to look at Tang Zheng. Dizang of Goguryeo wanted to keep Li Xiaotian in the ghost realm. This was undoubtedly the opposite of Tang Zheng's goal. Would he agree? As expected, Tang Zheng's expression changed when he heard this. He said, "Absolutely not." "Why not?" Dizang of Goguryeo did not expect Tang Zheng's reaction to be so big. He could not help but ask curiously. Tang Zheng did not delay any longer and simply stated his purpose. "I came to the ghost realm to bring her back to life. I will not let her stay in the ghost realm." As soon as these words came out, other than Song Jianguang, the other 9 kings of hell were shocked. With their experience, they never thought that someone would dare to make such a request. Of course, they were the same as Song Jianguang. They had no way to do this. Dizang of Goguryeo raised his eyebrows. His calm face seemed to wrinkle. He stared at Tang Zheng and asked, "You want to bring her back to life?" Tang Zheng nodded heavily. "Human death is a law of nature. You are going against the law of nature. Do you understand?" Dizang of Goguryeo asked. Tang Zheng nodded his head openly and without hiding anything. "You are a cultivator. You should understand the laws of nature and not go against them," Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva said earnestly. Tang Zheng had a different opinion. He shook his head and said, "Cultivators seize the good fortune of heaven and earth. They cultivate their body and mind, prolong their lifespan and enhance their strength. This is fighting against the heavens. How can you talk about following the law of nature? If you really follow the law of nature, then you should be an ordinary person and live and die normally." Dizang of Goguryeo did not expect Tang Zheng to have such an argument. He was stunned, but he was not frightened by these words. "Your words seem to make sense, but in fact, they are ridiculous." Hearing Dizang of Goguryeo bluntly reprimanding Tang Zheng's words as ridiculous, the 10 kings of hell became excited. Their eyes lit up. There was no doubt that Tang Zheng was on their side. If they had an ally like Tang Zheng, the 10 kings of hell would have more bargaining chips. Li Xiaotian's heart tightened. He looked at Tang Zheng worriedly. He wanted to persuade him, but there was no way to do so. Tang Zheng was a stubborn person. Once he made up his mind, no matter what she said, she would not be able to persuade him to change his mind. Moreover, Li Xiaotian agreed with Tang Zheng's words from the bottom of his heart. He did not want him to go against his will and say words that went against his heart. "I don't think it's ridiculous," Tang Zheng argued. Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head. "We can be different from ordinary people because we are the chosen ones. The heavens chose us. That is why we have today's achievements." "The chosen ones?" Tang Zheng frowned. This statement was extremely mysterious, but he did not believe it at all. Dizang of Goguryeo seemed to see through his thoughts and continued, "The chosen ones naturally follow the heavens. They are definitely not fighting against the heavens as you said. Because everything you have is given to you by the heavens. Otherwise, do you think you can have today's achievements?" Tang Zheng suddenly felt that it was a little ridiculous. He admired Dizang of Goguryeo very much, but he felt that his statement was really ridiculous. Perhaps, this was the difference between the ancient people and the modern people. Dizang of Goguryeo still retained many of the ancient people's thoughts, so it was inevitable that there would be limitations. Tang Zheng's strength could not be compared to the Dizang of Goguryeo, but in some aspects, he felt that he was better than the Dizang of Goguryeo. "My achievements are the result of my own hard work, not the heavens." "You are wrong about this," Tang Zheng retorted bluntly. Dizang of Goguryeo heard this and his frown deepened. This was a challenge to his authority, and even his beliefs. "You are going astray. I taught you the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but I didn't expect that after so long, you still haven't understood the essence of it. Instead, you have gone astray. What a pity. Dizang of Goguryeo sighed with regret. After a pause, Dizang of Goguryeo looked at Li Xiaotian and said, all living things are equal. You are the same as everyone else. After they die, they cannot be resurrected. You can't either. Even if I have a way, I will not make an exception for you. Tang Zheng raised his eyebrows. He went through untold hardships to meet the Dizang of Goguryeo just to ask him about the method of resurrection. Now, he did not care about his feelings at all and directly rejected him. Tang Zheng would not sit by and do nothing. He asked doubtfully, Dizang of Goguryeo, do you have a method of resurrection? Of course, although this is difficult, it is not absolutely impossible. But I will not do so. Dizang of Goguryeo said decisively. He insisted on his beliefs and would not compromise at all. Tang Zheng's head sank and said, for me, can't you make an exception? Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head without hesitation. I deliver all living things from torment, for all living things to be equal. How can I go against my own great wish here? Li Xiaotian was disappointed. She originally thought that after finding the Dizang of Goguryeo, she could be resurrected and be together with Tang Zheng. But her dream was shattered. The corner of her mouth hooked up into a bitter smile. She thought bitterly, forget it, this period of time is already the happiest time of my life. Even if I can't be resurrected, I can often reminisce about it. This is enough. However, Tang Zheng did not think so. He had promised Li Xiaotian. Moreover, there was a way, and it was not that there was no way. How could he back down? He finally understood the mystery behind Li Xiaotian's words. People were selfish and had the concept of closeness and distance. It was impossible to treat everyone equally. It was simply impossible to achieve equality for all living things. At this moment, he had a deep understanding. He understood that Dizang of Goguryeo's great wish was really a castle in the air, without a solid foundation. In fact, Tang Zheng was a person of great love and righteousness. If he could not do this, others might not be able to do it. The 10 kings of hell saw that the atmosphere between the two sides was becoming more and more delicate, and the differences were getting bigger and bigger. Especially on the matter of resurrecting Li Xiaotian, the differences between the two sides could not be reconciled. At that moment, they all saw hope and looked at Dizang of Goguryeo in ridicule. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva looked at Tang Zheng with a burning gaze as he had already seen through his thoughts. He loudly chanted the name of Buddha, raised his palm, and said in a loud voice, Tang Zheng, you have already gone astray. The sea of bitterness is boundless, turn back and you will be saved. Otherwise, your life's cultivation and achievements will all be for naught. Tang Zheng was not moved. He said, I don't think this is a sea of bitterness or a wrong path. I have made up my mind. I must save her. No one can stop all of this. Pausing for a moment, Tang Zheng emphasized each word, no. No one. The 10 kings of hell almost cheered in excitement. This was Tang Zheng's declaration against the Dizang of Goguryeo. To them, it was as pleasant as heavenly music. The corners of the 10 kings of hell's mouth couldn't help but reveal an undetectable smile. Li Xiaotian subconsciously tightened his grip on Tang Zheng's hand. His heart also tensed up as he nervously looked at the Dizang of Goguryeo. Pairs of eyes simultaneously locked onto the Dizang of Goguryeo. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at Tang Zheng with bright eyes. His originally kind eyes became sharper. After pondering for a long time, he said, Tang Zheng, you should go back. This is not something you can control. If I don't succeed, I will not go back. Tang Zheng said resolutely. Then you can stay. Anyway, with your 9 yang saint body, you don't need to fear this Yin Qi. No. Tang Zheng firmly shook his head. He didn't have time to delay. If Li Xiaotian dragged on for too long and couldn't be revived, then it would be too late for regrets. Are you so stubborn? Seeing that Tang Zheng even refused to eat, the Dizang of Goguryeo became angry. Back then, when he faced the Shura and the king of the underworld, he used thunderous methods. It could be seen that although he had a merciful heart, he could also become angry. That anger was not something an ordinary person could endure. Tang Zheng obviously understood this point but did not back down in the slightest as he said, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva, no matter what request you have, as long as you can save her then I will agree to it. You can't help me, so naturally you won't ask for anything. Tang Zheng took a deep breath and asked one last time, you really won't save her? All life is equal. She will not receive any special treatment. The Dizang of Goguryeo insisted. Tang Zheng finally understood that no matter how he earnestly begged, the Dizang of Goguryeo would not agree to it. Tang Zheng took a step forward and closed the distance between him and the Dizang of Goguryeo. He said in a deep voice, Dizang of Goguryeo, your cultivation is higher than mine, but for her, even if I know I can't win, I still have to make a move. If I win by a fluke or two, I don't know if you will agree to let me revive her. He was directly issuing a challenge. Audacious to the extreme. The 10 kings of hell all had the same thought in their hearts. Although they opposed the Dizang of Goguryeo, none of them dared to challenge the Dizang of Goguryeo and fight with him. This was because they knew very well that they were not a match for the Dizang of Goguryeo. The 10 kings of hell cared about their own reputation and would not fight even if they knew they would lose. Tang Zheng was different. He knew he would lose, but he still fought for a chance to live. Giving up without trying was not his style. He only hoped that the Dizang of Goguryeo would agree to this condition. However, the Dizang of Goguryeo directly shook his head, no matter if you win or lose, I will not revive her. Tang Zheng almost spat out a mouthful of old blood. The Dizang of Goguryeo was so stubborn. He had no choice but to fight and force him to revive Li Shaotian. Then I'll offend you. Tang Zheng made his move. The Dizang of Goguryeo chanted the name of Buddha, the sea of bitterness is boundless, repent and the shore is at hand. Chapter 1363. The earth-shattering power swept toward Tang Zheng. Tang Zheng was like a small boat, bobbing up and down in the storm. Tang Zheng knew that he was no match for Dizang of Goguryeo, but he still rushed over without hesitation. With a thought, he used the sky-swallowing technique. A huge black hole suddenly appeared, and the Yin-Chi in the world was sucked into the black hole like rivers flowing into the sea. Hiss! Seeing this, the 10 kings of hell all gasped. It was not difficult for their eyes to recognize the terrifying power of the sky-swallowing technique. They looked at each other. As soon as they attacked, they could see that Tang Zheng's strength was really different from last time. He was not inferior to them at all. How can he improve so quickly? The 10 Yama kings were enraged, and they couldn't help but feel a little jealous. They had suffered untold hardships and experienced countless years to reach their current level of cultivation. But Tang Zheng was different. At such a young age, he could stand shoulder to shoulder with them. This gave them the illusion that they had lived in vain all these years. Dizang of Goguryeo's eyes were full of splendor. He did not expect Tang Zheng to improve so much, but he was not jealous. His cultivation was still much higher than Tang Zheng's. With a slap, a golden light appeared in the stormy aura. A Sanskrit word grew bigger and bigger, and finally turned into a huge swastika. The swastika fell from the sky, and the terrifying pressure made Tang Zheng breathless. His cheeks instantly turned red. Roar! He roared to the sky and pushed his palms up. The black hole rushed into the sky and met the golden swastika. Black and golden light immediately covered the sky. The golden light was strong and covered the black light. However, the advantage did not last for long. The black light shone and swallowed the golden light. The light of the swastika was greatly reduced. Dizang of Goguryeo frowned and muttered to himself, "Your sky-swallowing technique is really extraordinary. It can actually block my attack." Back then, when fighting against the Lord of the Underworld, Tang Zheng had also used the sky-swallowing technique. The Lord of the Underworld's Yama seal had even merged with the sky-swallowing technique. Therefore, Dizang of Goguryeo was no stranger to him. However, this sky-swallowing technique was worlds apart from before. Its might was simply incomparable. It's really a pity that you're wasting your cultivation in front of me like this. Quickly turn back and you'll be saved. Dizang of Goguryeo advised earnestly. Tang Zhang's expression was firm and unwavering. He gritted his teeth and said, I must save her. I must find a way to save her. I only hope that you will help me this time on account of our past friendship. Dizang of Goguryeo was even more determined than Tang Zhang. He was not shaken at all, and there was no room for negotiation. All living beings are equal, there is no exception. Tang Zhang's eyes dimmed, but they quickly burned again. He looked at Dizang of Goguryeo in a crazed manner and roared, Shura. Roar. With a deafening roar, a figure appeared in front of everyone. Everyone was frightened by the two words Shura. Although not everyone had seen the Shura's might with their own eyes, they all knew how terrifying the Shura was from word of mouth. Seeing the Shura with their own eyes, the 10 kings of hell felt a chill in their hearts. They almost lost their minds as they stared at the figure in a daze. Among them, Song Jianguang's expression was the worst. He had seen the Shura's might with his own eyes when he rushed to the 18 layers of hell. At that time, Dizang of Goguryeo had only barely suppressed him and won by a narrow margin. Now, how terrifying was the Shura's strength. He did not dare to imagine it, nor could he imagine it. However, the Shura had changed so much that he almost could not recognize him. The Shura used to be a colossus. Now, he was about the same height as an ordinary person. However, the aura he exuded was terrifying. Just as Song Jianguang expected, once the Shura appeared, the aura of heaven and earth changed. A strong wind rose from the ground and swept in all directions. Ah, the ghosts screamed and flew toward the Shura, as if they were going to be devoured and refined into a part of him. The Shura was born from the condensation of countless ghosts in the 18 layers of hell. These ghosts were like nourishment for him. The moment he appeared, he could not wait to cast a spell, as if he wanted to absorb all the ghosts into his body. This was a subconscious action without any thought at all. Evil creature. A thunderous roar exploded in the clear sky, shaking everyone's ears to the point of buzzing. Dizang of Goguryeo stared at the Shura like lightning. The Shura raised his head proudly. He was no longer the ignorant killing machine from before. When he saw the Dizang of Goguryeo, a hatred from the depths of his soul erupted like a volcano. The Shura's eyes flashed with a dark light, as if there were lightning and thunder. It was terrifying and horrifying. Who are you? The Shura did not recognize the Dizang of Goguryeo. He suppressed his anger and asked. Hearing his clear and normal speech, not only the 10 kings of hell, even the Dizang of Goguryeo was shocked. He pointed at him in disbelief. You. How can you speak? All along, Tang Zheng thought that the Dizang of Goguryeo knew the magical effects of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, especially the fact that it could awaken the Shura's intelligence. After all, the Dizang of Goguryeo had told him many times that he must recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra every day to suppress the Shura. From the looks of it, the Dizang of Goguryeo did not know that the Ksitigarbha Sutra had such an effect. It allowed the Shura to bid farewell to the killing machine and become a sentient individual. What's the fuss about my speech? I asked you first, who are you? Why do I want to beat you up whenever I see you? The Shura asked suspiciously. The Dizang of Goguryeo was sure that the Shura had gained intelligence. He looked at Tang Zheng and found that he was not surprised. It was obvious that he already knew about this. The key point was, how did the Shura gain intelligence? The Dizang of Goguryeo knew the dangers of the Shura. Once he gained intelligence, it was definitely not a good thing. His expression became serious. I am the Dizang of Goguryeo. The Dizang of Goguryeo said in a deep voice. The Dizang of Goguryeo? Why do I hate you to the bone? The Shura asked in confusion. He did not remember anything about the 18 layers of hell. The Dizang of Goguryo's heart trembled. Because you are an evil creature. I specifically suppressed you. Of course you would hate me. The Shura was furious. You dare to suppress me? He suddenly realized that he must have been suppressed by him before he gained intelligence. That was why he had such an unforgettable hatred. Evil creature, if I don't suppress you, you will bring disaster to the world. How can I turn a blind eye to it? The Dizang of Goguryeo said in a loud voice. Bring disaster to the world? The Shura looked around and saw the living beings of the ghost realm. His eyes lit up as if he had seen an endless amount of delicious food. Ha ha ha. The Shura burst into laughter. As you wish, I will absorb all of these ghosts for my own use. After he finished speaking, he opened his mouth and took a deep breath. A cold wind blew and the reincarnated ghosts could not stand still and flew towards the Shura. It seemed that in the next second, the ghosts would fall into the Shura's mouth and be refined into a part of him. Stop! Tang Zheng saw this and shouted to stop him. The Shura was startled and subconsciously stopped. He looked at Tang Zheng with displeasure. You want to stop me too? Tang Zheng said without hesitation. Shura, I asked you to come out to deal with him, not these weak ghosts. When the Dizang of Goguryeo heard this, he could not help but look at Tang Zheng with approval. The Shura frowned and said sternly, I will decide my own matters. How can you decide? The balance between Tang Zheng and the Shura was very fragile. The Shura needed Tang Zheng to recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra to increase his intelligence, while Tang Zheng needed the Shura to help him fight against strong enemies. Once the Shura's intelligence increased to a certain level, or once Tang Zheng's strength increased to a certain level, he would not need the Shura's help. Then, this balance would be broken. Both sides were very clear about this point, but no one pointed it out. After all, they still needed each other at the moment. Tang Zheng summoned the Shura because he had no other choice. His strength was not as good as the Dizang of Goguryeo. If he wanted to force the Dizang of Goguryeo to tell him the way to revive Li Shaotian, only the Shura could help him. But the Shura was also very uncontrollable, such as now. Tang Zheng's face was ashen. Then are you going to go back on our original agreement? The Shura's heart shook. Only now did he remember that he still needed the Tang Zheng. If he angered him, it would not be good for him. The Shura coldly snorted and said, then let them go for now. As his voice fell, the angry wind calmed down. The ghosts fell to the ground in panic and retreated in panic. Dizang of Goguryeo saw all of this with his eyes. He was very puzzled about the agreement between the two. He wanted to know why the Shura had intelligence. Tang Zheng, you still have a kind heart. You know that these ghosts are innocent. Dizang of Goguryeo said with a complicated expression. It was unknown whether it was praise or sarcasm. Tang Zheng had a clear conscience and said, I just want to know the way to revive her. If you have misgivings about your great wish, you don't need to do it yourself. You just need to tell me the way. Tang Zheng, why are you still so stubborn? Do you think that you can use the Shura to force me to tell you the way? Dizang of Goguryeo asked back. This is my only way. I can only try once. Tang Zheng was helpless. Originally, I asked you to suppress the Shura, not to help him. Dizang of Goguryeo raised his voice and said. You asked me to convert myself. I did as you said and recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra every day. The Ksitigarbha Sutra is indeed miraculous. It dissolved the ruthless aura on his body and at the same time gave him intelligence. It made him no longer a killing machine and had his own consciousness. It was equivalent to obtaining a new life. Tang Zheng said the truth. What? Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva was shocked. Even though his heart was as calm as still water, when he heard the reason behind it, he couldn't help but feel his heart sway, and his face turned pale with shock. All of this was caused by the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It was true that he comprehended the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but the way of heaven contained within was not something that he could completely understand. Only now did he know that the Ksitigarbha Sutra could increase the Shura's intelligence. Could this be the way of heaven's intention? The 10 kings of hell were shocked by this news. They all looked at Dizang of Goguryeo and the Shura. The Shura was actually given all of this by the Ksitigarbha Sutra. This meant that Dizang of Goguryeo was partly responsible for the current situation. King Yenluo rolled his eyes and said, "As everyone knows, the Shura is the public enemy of the ghost realm. The reason why this evil creature became so strong was actually because of Dizang of Goguryeo." King Yenluo's eyes became brighter and brighter. Dizang of Goguryeo, you keep saying that you are thinking for the ghost realm, but is this really for the ghost realm? Everyone saw the scene just now clearly. The Shura wants to absorb all the ghosts in the ghost realm. This is equivalent to Dizang of Goguryeo helping the evildoer. Without a doubt, King Yenluo's questioning had ulterior motives and was very destructive. The other kings of hell nodded in agreement. They looked at Dizang of Goguryeo with eyes as sharp as knives. Chapter 1364. Dizang of Goguryo's eyes changed as he stared at the Shura. Of course, he heard the meaning behind King Yama's words, but he didn't care. He was more interested in the Ksitigarbha Sutra that made the Shura gain intelligence. He pondered for a moment, then suddenly said, "So that's how it is, that's how it is." The others were curious, not knowing what this so-called "so that's how it is" meant. I really haven't comprehended all the essence of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng, you have unlocked another profound meaning of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It was not in vain for me to pass on the Ksitigarbha Sutra to you. Dizang of Goguryeo said with emotion. Tang Zheng frowned and asked in surprise, "Aren't you worried that the Shura has gained intelligence?" Dizang of Goguryeo looked up to the sky and laughed. He chanted the name of Buddha and said, "All things have spirit, all living things are equal." This is one of the profound meanings of the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Dizang of Goguryeo has unlocked the Shura's intelligence, which proves this. I can't be happier, why would I be worried? Tang Zheng was stunned. From Dizang of Goguryo's previous reaction, he thought that he would be angry, but now he was overthinking. He was indeed overthinking. Dizang of Goguryo's lifelong pursuit was equality, so the Ksitigarbha Sutra he created was also based on this. The Ksitigarbha Sutra unlocking the Shura's intelligence proved this point. It was a recognition of all his hard work, so he was naturally happy. Do you think the Shura can help you defeat me and then make me tell you the way to resurrect her? Dizang of Goguryeo asked. Tang Zheng didn't answer, which was a tacit agreement. Dizang of Goguryeo smiled confidently and said, "Your wishful thinking is wrong. So what if the Shura has intelligence? He is only at the second level of the Mahayana realm, he is no match for me." Dizang of Goguryeo was able to see through the Shura's strength with just a glance, which made Tang Zheng very surprised. One had to know that in the past, he did not have Shura's strength. However, Dizang of Goguryeo was different. This was enough to prove that Dizang of Goguryeo was much stronger than Shura. There was simply no chance of winning. However, Tang Zheng did not hesitate because he had no other choice. Shura did not retreat. Shura, who had always won every battle, would not retreat in front of Dizang of Goguryeo. He turned his head and glanced at him, saying, "You want me to defeat him? As you wish." Shwa! The Azura saber suddenly appeared and soared into the air. It hissed as it absorbed the Yin Chi in the air, turning into a huge black saber that seemed to be about to cut across the sky. Dizang of Goguryeo was interested and nodded seriously, "You are indeed much stronger than before." Dizang of Goguryeo stretched out his hand. The golden light soared into the air, enveloping his hand and then spreading to his whole body. After a while, he was completely bathed in the golden light. The golden light shone, and his appearance was solemn. He put his hands together and saw Shura's big hand pointing. The Azura saber shot through the air, making a piercing sound. Dizang of Goguryeo was not in a hurry. He slowly pushed his hand forward, and the golden light flew from his palm. A golden swastika flew out from her palm, intertwining with the surrounding golden light. In an instant, half of the sky was dyed golden, sweeping away the haze of the ghost realm, giving people a feeling of bathing in the spring breeze. The Azura saber lay across the sky, almost occupying half of the sky. The Azura saber absorbed the yin chi of heaven and earth, and a vortex condensed on the saber, whistling in the wind. Shura waved his big hand downward, and the Azura saber seemed to sense it and slashed downward. Whoosh! The air was torn in half, and the Azura saber slashed down at the swastika from above. At this moment, the world was quiet, and only the sound of the wind and the air being torn apart was heard. Pairs of eyes were focused on the sky. Boom! An earth-shattering sound rushed into everyone's ears. The ghost generals and ghost envoys fell to the ground, bleeding from their 7 orifices, and their eyes dimmed. All the kings of hell also retreated, unwilling to face the aftermath of this attack head-on. Tang Zheng waved his hands in the air, and a black hole appeared, blocking in front of Li Xiaotian. The aftermath of the attack was immediately swallowed by the black hole, and they were not hurt. But his expression was very serious. This level of battle was really terrifying. It was far more fierce than the battle between Shura and Saint King by 1,000 times. The Azura saber shattered, turning into wisps of yin chi. The golden swastika held on for a while, and turned into little golden light, flying toward Shura. It gathered again on top of his head, and kept spinning. The golden light fell, and like a cover, it quickly shrouded Shura. Ah, Shura saw this, and he screamed in panic. He kicked his legs, and slammed into the golden light. Clang! The golden light trembled, but it held on. Shura did not break the golden cover, and he used his fists and feet in vain, and kept hitting the golden cover. In the end, he had to give up. Dizang of Goguryeo chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, and golden Sanskrit words came out of his mouth, falling on the golden cover. The golden light shone brightly, and like a pocket, it quickly shrank inward, and immediately pressed down on Shura. Shura raised his hands, trying to hold on with his hands, but as the golden Sanskrit words increased, it became harder for him to hold on. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva originally had a suppressive effect on the ghost realm, and the Azura's evil aura was refined by Tang Zheng, but the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva purposely used the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva to suppress the Azura. Shura still had no room to resist. This scene deeply shocked the 10 kings of hell. They had seen Shura's attack, and they asked themselves, none of them was a match for Shura. Shura had broken through the difficult threshold and reached the Mahayana realm. However, none of the kings of hell had reached the Mahayana realm. King Yanluo and King Songjiang were only at the 9th level of the divine transformation realm, and were still a step away from the Mahayana realm. Even so, Shura was still defeated. He was defeated so thoroughly and so quickly. Even if the 10 kings of hell joined forces, they would definitely not be a match for Dizang of Goguryeo. This gap was not something that could be made up with numbers. Only then did they believe that Dizang of Goguryeo had surpassed them by too much, and left them far behind. They found it hard to suppress their complicated emotions and surging emotions as they looked at Tang Zheng at the same time. He was the source of all this, so what should he do? Of course, Tang Zheng would not just watch as Di Luo was defeated. The Azura was his trump card. If he lost, then he would really be at his wit's end. I know the Ksitigarbha Sutra too. Tang Zheng rose into the air and flew above the golden light shield. He put his palms together and kept chanting the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Golden Sanskrit characters flew out of his mouth and flew toward the golden light shield. However, they were all Sanskrit characters, but they were controlled by different people, so they naturally became enemies. It was like different people could use the same technique to attack each other. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was no exception. Boom! 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 The 2 Sanskrit characters kept attacking each other. Golden light scattered and dyed the surroundings golden. The 10 kings of hell retreated again and again. The power of this battle was terrifying, and they did not want to be affected. They were both the Ksitigarbha Sutra, but one was the creator, and the other was the successor. Unexpectedly, they kept fighting, and it was difficult to determine who was the winner. However, Tang Zheng knew that all this was an illusion. Once Dizang of Goguryeo really exerted his strength, he would definitely not be a match. But he still did not give up. His golden Sanskrit characters tore a huge crack in the golden light shield. Shura excitedly roared and grew taller. The golden light shield on top of him creaked as if it was about to shatter. Dizang of Goguryeo put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha, saying, "Tangjeng, you are indeed someone with great comprehension. In such a short time, you have such a deep understanding of the Ksitigarbha Sutra and reached such a level." With a change of topic, his voice became a bit sharper. He widened his eyes and pretended to be an angry Vajra. He said in a deep voice, "But, if you want to use Ksitigarbha to fight against me, you are still far from enough." A few golden Sanskrit characters flew out of his mouth and intertwined in the air, forming a huge golden swastika character that fell from the sky. Tangjing chanted and golden Sanskrit characters flew out of his mouth, but he was unable to turn them into golden Sanskrit characters. Obviously, that could only be done at a higher level. The golden Sanskrit characters flew towards the swastika character, but they shattered upon contact and turned into rays of golden light that scattered around Tangjing. The swastika character flew above Tangjing's head and scattered a golden light that turned into a golden light shield, covering both Tangjing and Shura. Roar! Shura finally tore apart the original golden light shield. Before he could fully extend his tall body, he found another golden light shield covering him and Shura. Light flashed in his hand and the black Shura saber condensed into shape once again. Accompanied by his angry roar, he slashed at the golden light shield. Boom! The golden light shield trembled but did not disintegrate. Instead, the Shura saber's light gradually dimmed. Tangjing's golden Sanskrit characters hit the golden light shield but had no effect. However, he did not stop because stopping meant failure. Li Xiaotian's eyes were red. Tangjing had sacrificed too much for her. He fought so desperately just to revive her. How could she not be moved by this? The golden light shield shrunk and compressed the space between Shura and Tangjing. The two of them were in a difficult situation but could not break out. The golden light shield closed in on them. Boom! Boom! The two of them fell to the ground and were pressed down hard. They could not get up at all. They were already unable to move, and the only thing that could be heard was the sound of their heavy breathing, which sounded like bellows. Dizang of Goguryeo flew down and landed beside them. He looked down at them and read their thoughts from their unyielding eyes. "Are you still not convinced?" Tangjing gritted his teeth and endured the pressure. He used all his strength and said, "If you don't revive Li Xiaotian, I will not give in. I will not regret it even if I die." Stubborn. Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head and sighed. Tangjing was indeed stubborn. If he did not achieve his goal, he would not compromise. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at him again. The light of wisdom in his eyes was different from before. He could not help but feel gratified. "You have developed spiritual wisdom. You should distinguish good from evil and repent. This is true wisdom. You are stubborn. You don't know that the sea of bitterness is boundless. Repent and you will be saved. You are too obsessed. Not good, not good." Dizang of Goguryeo sighed and stretched out his hand. The swastika flew from his palm to Tangjing. Chapter 1365. The swastika pierced through the golden barrier and landed on top of Tangjing's head. Boom! With a loud sound, it was as if the sky had collapsed, ruthlessly pressing down on Tangjing's body. He was completely sprawled on the ground, not even having the strength to gasp for breath. "Ah, no!" Li Xiaotian screamed involuntarily. She jumped in front of the golden barrier, feeling as if a knife was being twisted in her heart. She reached out with both hands, trying to break through the golden barrier, but she was sent flying by a huge force, falling to the ground in a sorry state. She was already a wisp of a living soul. She no longer had the strength she had when she was alive, so she had no way of resisting this force. No! Seeing this, Tangjing screamed at the top of his lungs. Dizang of Goguryeo, don't hurt her. Dizang of Goguryeo floated in midair, golden light flickering. He glanced at Li Xiaotian and said, "Of course I won't hurt her. Miss, all life is equal, but you don't agree. Do you still insist on this view?" Li Xiaotian staggered up, looking up at Dizang of Goguryeo without the slightest fear. She said sternly, "Yes. All life cannot be absolutely equal." Dizang of Goguryeo sighed and shook his head, saying, "Silly child, you are the same as him." Pausing for a moment, Dizang of Goguryeo said to Tang Zheng, "Your obsession is too deep. If you don't concentrate on comprehending the Ksitigarbha Sutra, your obsession will increase day by day, and it will only harm your cultivation. I passed on the Ksitigarbha Sutra to you, so of course I won't let you fall into this path." Tang Zheng's heart moved. He asked, "What do you want to do?" Dizang of Goguryeo stared deeply at Tang Zheng, neither sad nor happy. He said solemnly, "I want you to concentrate on comprehending the Ksitigarbha Sutra. When you suddenly wake up, it will be the time for you to leave the sea of bitterness." Finished speaking, he flipped his palm. The swastika above Tang Zheng's head erupted with golden light, rumbling like thunder. Crack. The ground cracked open, revealing a bottomless pit. Before Tang Zheng could react, his body rapidly fell down. He tried to circulate his power to counteract the force of the fall, but to no avail. The ground healed bit by bit, and soon, it was completely sealed, as if everything that had happened just now was just an illusion. If not for the fact that Tang Zheng had indeed disappeared, everyone would have thought that they had seen wrongly. Tang Zheng. Li Xiaotian screamed at the top of his lungs and pounced over, only to find that he missed. The golden barrier disappeared. Only Shura was left lying on the ground with difficulty. He stared at Dizang of Goguryeo fearfully. Li Xiaotian kept slapping the ground as if he wanted the crack to reappear, but it was all in vain. His voice was hoarse from crying, but he still couldn't get Tang Zheng to come back. She suddenly turned her head and rushed to Dizang of Goguryeo, begging, "Dizang of Goguryeo, I beg you, let him come back. I beg you, I will agree to any conditions. I don't want to be resurrected, I want to stay in the world of spirits and souls." All of this happened because of her, so one could imagine the self-blame and shame in her heart. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at her lightly. He went to the sea of suffering. If he can understand the true meaning of the Ksitigarbha Sutra, he can naturally leave the sea of suffering and return to your side. As for your resurrection, you can't be resurrected. No, I won't be resurrected. I beg you to let him return to the human world. He still has too many things to do, and many people need his protection. The human world was full of changes. If Tang Zheng was gone for too long, she really couldn't predict what would happen. Therefore, she had to think of a way to let Tang Zheng return to the human world. Dizang of Goguryeo didn't waver at all, saying, "This matter has been decided, there is no room for maneuver. If he wants to return to the human world as soon as possible, then the only way is to leave the sea of suffering as soon as possible. This is the right way." Seeing that he wouldn't budge no matter what, Li Xiaotian despaired and sat on the ground dispiritedly. She had never felt so helpless before. When the other kings of hell saw this scene, they were deeply shocked. They had always thought that Tang Zheng and Dizang of Goguryeo had a close relationship. They never expected that Dizang of Goguryeo would use a thunderous method to trap Tang Zheng. What was that huge crack just now? They didn't understand at all. Hearing Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's words, he was trapped in the sea of bitterness, but what kind of place was the sea of bitterness? They had never heard of it. They once again deeply felt the gap between them and Dizang of Goguryeo. They had originally planned to jump and resist, but at this moment, they all wanted to retreat in their hearts. They looked at each other with ugly expressions. No one wanted to rush out and end up in the same state as Tang Zheng. The Shura lay on the ground with a golden shield on his head, unable to move. His gaze towards Dizang of Goguryeo was gradually filled with respect. The Shura didn't have his past memories and didn't know about the feud with Dizang of Goguryeo. However, he still regarded Dizang of Goguryeo as an enemy. Dizang of Goguryeo also looked at the Shura and said thoughtfully, Shura, you originally didn't have intelligence, but the Ksitigarbha Sutra gave you intelligence. This is your opportunity. You are fated with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Roar, the Shura wasn't interested in these words at all and roared hysterically. Dizang of Goguryeo saw this and shook his head slightly. Your intelligence hasn't been fully awakened. You still can't understand the wonders of this opportunity. I don't blame you. During this period of time, I will properly convert you and get rid of the last bit of hostility in your body. That will be the time when you will truly be reborn. Dizang of Goguryeo wanted to convert the Shura. This was not an easy task. Back then, he didn't succeed. Now, he had a sudden impulse. This wasn't difficult to understand. Back then, the Shura was a killing machine without intelligence. It wasn't easy to convert him. After all, converting a machine was like playing the lute to a cow. Now, it was different. The Shura had intelligence. This could be converted. After all, with intelligence, he could think and receive information. I don't want you to convert me. I'm fine. The Shura roared and kept struggling. Stubborn and stubborn. Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head and sighed. But I won't let go of any target of conversion. This is to save you, and also to save the common people. The Shura naturally didn't agree. He used all his tricks and tried to escape from Dizang of Goguryeo's hands. But it was to no avail. Dizang of Goguryeo no longer paid attention to the Shura. Instead, he turned his attention to the 10 kings of hell. When the 10 kings of hell saw his gaze turn to them, they couldn't help but feel a chill in their hearts. Each and every one of their expressions became extremely unnatural. King Yenluo felt as if there was a blade on his back. He said resentfully, Dizang of Goguryeo, don't misunderstand. This time, it's all because of Tang Zheng. If he didn't try so hard to get us to find you, we wouldn't have come here. Yes, yes. All of this is because of Tang Zheng. The other kings of hell nodded in agreement. Song Jiangwang, however, didn't say anything and remained silent. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at him curiously and asked, Song Jiangwang, don't you have anything to say? Song Jiangwang raised his head and met Dizang of Goguryeo's gaze. Although Dizang of Goguryeo's gaze was as calm and clear as a lake, it seemed to be able to see through his heart. It was as if he was standing naked in front of him without any secrets. It's true that all of this was Tang Zheng's idea. He only wanted to save people. However, everyone is still dissatisfied with your matter of saving all living beings. There's no doubt about this. Song Jiangwang took a deep breath and said in an earth-shattering manner. What? The other kings of hell turned pale with fright. Song Jiangwang, are you kidding me? If you want to die, why do you want to drag the other kings of hell down with you? This is too unkind. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at him with interest and said, do you have any objections to my actions? Song Jiangwang mustered all the courage in his body. He had never felt so conflicted and nervous before, but he still insisted on his answer. Yes, what this young lady said makes a lot of sense. The wish of equality for all living beings may seem beautiful, but in reality, it's like a castle in the air. Its foundation is unstable. Song Jiangwang said firmly. Dizang of Goguryeo glanced at the dazed Li Shaotian and his expression changed. Song Jiangwang, I didn't expect you to be the same as them. You're so shallow and stubborn. Song Jiangwang shook his head, I don't think so. Normally, I would seek out advantages and avoid disadvantages. But this time, I don't know why, but when I saw this young lady disregard her own safety and speak her truest thoughts, I was deeply shocked. Dizang of Goguryeo raised his eyebrows in surprise. He obviously knew that Dizang of Goguryeo had always sought out advantages and avoided disadvantages. Now that the situation was clear, he actually spoke up for Li Shaotian and opposed him. This was not a wise thing to do. The other kings of hell also looked at Song Jiangwang. They felt that he had really gone crazy to say such words. Two pairs of eyes stared at each other. An invisible pressure spread out from where their eyes met, making it hard for them to breathe. Good, very good. After a long time, Dizang of Goguryeo clapped his hands and praised, in the ghost realm, there will always be a king of hell who is good at speaking out for justice and speaking from his heart. What? Dizang of Goguryeo actually praised Song Jianguang? Was there a mistake? He was the exact opposite of Dizang of Goguryeo, and he actually liked him? Wasn't this masochistic? Dizang of Goguryeo's foresight was not something they could guess. He did not care about their shocked gazes. He pointed at Song Jianguang, then at Li Xiaotian who was lying on the ground, and said, "If you don't believe me, then I will use my actions to prove it. From now on, the two of you will stay by my side and bear witness to everything. I will let you know that you are wrong, very wrong." Song Jianguang's expression was calm, but his heart suddenly jumped. He seemed to be supporting Li Xiaotian and opposing Dizang of Goguryeo. His integrity was commendable. In reality, this was a strategy he had come up with after careful consideration. It was not an action he made on a whim. Song Jianguang's wisdom and resourcefulness were not for show. When Tang Zheng disappeared into the crack, his mind was spinning rapidly, thinking of the most advantageous strategy for himself. He was certain that after this incident, Dizang of Goguryeo's patience with the 10 kings of hell would no longer exist. He would promote his beliefs with great fanfare, and would not make a small fuss. This was a showdown with the kings of hell. Anyone who dared to obstruct him would not have a good ending. The position of the 10 kings of hell was in jeopardy. Song Jianguang had to think of a countermeasure as soon as possible. He indeed lived up to his name and came up with a countermeasure, which was to support Li Xiaotian. This way, he would be able to separate himself from the other kings of hell's camp. This was a risky move. Song Jianguang was gambling. If he gambled right, then he would succeed. If he gambled wrong, then he would be like the other kings of hell. There would be no worse outcome. Without a doubt, Song Jianguang gambled right. Dizang of Goguryeo allowed him and Li Xiaotian to bear witness to everything. This meant that Song Jianguang had successfully separated himself from the other kings of hell's camp. What would happen to the other kings of hell? Nothing good. Chapter 1366. Song Jianguang won the bet. The other kings of hell finally came back to their senses and shouted at him for being treacherous, glaring fiercely at Song Jianguang. Originally, they were still silently cursing Song Jianguang for courting death and secretly rejoicing in their hearts. Now it seemed that they were too short-sighted and didn't see that Song Jianguang was retreating in order to gain the upper hand. Dizang of Goguryeo didn't care about their little thoughts. His gaze was cold, and like a bolt of lightning, it fell on the 9th king of hell. In the past, I was worried about the stability of the ghost realm, so I didn't do anything to you. Now it seems that I was too kind. Dizang of Goguryeo's words made the 9th king of hell turn pale with fright. He asked in shock, "What are you going to do?" "Of course it's to promote my ideas and achieve the ultimate state of equality," Dizang of Goguryeo said in a deep voice, not giving them a chance to question or refute. No. Although he was afraid of Dizang of Goguryeo's strength, King Yenluo was the first to stand up and oppose. The other kings of hell also cowered in agreement. They had vested interests, so how could they watch Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva destroy everything they had? "I have made up my mind, no one can stop me," Dizang of Goguryeo said firmly. The kings of hell immediately fell silent and looked at each other. They didn't expect Dizang of Goguryeo to change his original style and become so unyielding. They regretted it. If they didn't follow Tang Zheng, things wouldn't have turned out like this. At least, the status quo could be maintained for a short period of time. What to do, what to do? The kings of hell were at a loss, and their expressions were extremely ugly. Although Song Jianguang was also very pained, after all, his interests would also be damaged, but he had one thing that the other kings of hell couldn't compare to. He was better at observing the situation and knew that this was the general trend and couldn't be stopped. He might as well give up everything he had now. Who said that he wouldn't have more in the future? As for Dizong of Goguryu's statement that all living beings were equal, he scoffed and did not believe it at all. Once the Dizong of Goguryo wanted to promote his ideas, he needed some people to implement them. This was the best opportunity for him to gain power again and create a new social class. He had to seize this opportunity. His future achievements would definitely surpass his current achievements, and all of the other Yama kings would be swept into the dust of history. None of the other Yama kings had considered this possibility at all. All of them were focused on the benefits that they could reap, and they were firmly protecting Qin Yi, not wanting to be harmed in the slightest. Only by giving up could one gain something. They didn't know this at all. Dizong of Goguryo did not give them a chance to hesitate. He said, "I know what you are thinking. You must be thinking of ways to stop me. So much so that you would not hesitate to destabilize the world of spirits and souls so that I would not dare to act rashly." The Yama kings were stunned. Their astonished eyes betrayed their true thoughts. Dizong of Goguryo saw through their thoughts and spoke their true thoughts. Dizong of Goguryo looked at them, and it was as he had guessed. With a swoosh, his solemn face became a little more fierce. "I will never tolerate you doing this. The world of spirits and souls must not be in chaos," Dizong of Goguryo said firmly. Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's gaze swept across the faces of the Yama kings one by one before changing the topic and saying, "Tang Zheng's obsession is too deep and he does not know how to repent, but he has also done a good deed for me." What was it? Everyone's interest was piqued. Dizong of Goguryo pointed at the Yama kings and said, "He gathered all of you together, so that you can't escape." "What do you mean?" The Yama kings' hearts skipped a beat. They had an ominous premonition. Dizong of Goguryo slowly flew towards the Yama kings. He looked down at them and said, "You have bad intentions. You have enslaved the world of spirits and souls for so many years. Who knows how many lives you have killed? Now you are thinking of ways to stop me. If I leave you alive, the world of spirits and souls will continue to fall." Although these words were short, they were filled with endless murderous intent. The Yama kings' hearts sank. Their faces became extremely ugly. They looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Song Jiangwang still had a lingering fear in his heart. He had almost ended up in the same situation as them. He really had too much foresight. He gazed deeply at Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva and thought to himself, "I am no longer the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva of the past. I can fool him with a few words." Back then, Dizong of Goguryo swore that he would not become a Buddha until hell was empty. This was Song Jiangwang's scheme. Now, using this trick to deal with him would not work at all. The Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva's entire body glowed with a golden light. The solemn expression on his face faded, and he became incomparably fierce. Wherever his gaze passed, it was as if there was a powerful blade on his body, causing people to tremble in fear. The Yama kings knew that something was wrong. They immediately turned around. As long as they left the eye of reincarnation and returned to their own territory. Dizong of Goguryo wanted to deal with them, but he had to think twice. They had enough strength to disturb the peace of the world of spirits and souls. They cast spells one after another, trying to return to their own territory from the teleportation array. However, when they cast spells, the teleportation array did not even have the slightest fluctuation of mana. What's going on? They were shocked and looked at the teleportation array in disbelief. The next moment, they suddenly realized. They turned to look at Dizong of Goguryo and said in horror, You did something? How simple is it to restrict a teleportation array?" Dizong of Goguryo said casually. They immediately understood that the Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had already made up his mind. They were like fish in a net, how could they escape? "What should we do?" They looked at each other. "He doesn't want us to live. Then let's fight." The Yama kings gritted their teeth and said fiercely. "Fight." The The Yama Kings had always been at the top of the pyramid of the world of spirits and souls. Ever since Dizang of Goguryeo appeared, they had been trembling with fear. They could fall off the high platform at any time. They had had enough of this kind of life. They had long wanted to resist, but their hearts were not united. No one stood up, so naturally, they could not resist. It was different this time. Dizang of Goguryeo had already forced them to their doorstep and put a knife to their necks. If they did not resist, only death would await them. They had always been the ones to decide the fate of others. When had their own fate been controlled by others? Thus, they reached a tacit understanding in an instant. Even if the hope was slim, they had to fight. Otherwise, what was the difference between being robbed and dying? They really could not accept that a person who had always been in awe of them would be on equal footing with them in the future. This was even more uncomfortable than killing them. Dizang of Goguryeo shook his head and said sternly, stubborn and unrepentant. He chanted the name of Buddha. He put his palms together and separated them again. A golden light flew out from between his palms. Whoosh! The golden light shot towards the 9 Yama Kings. The Yama Kings shouted one after another. Lights suddenly appeared in their hands. 9 Yama King's seals flew into the air and fiercely smashed towards the golden light. With a rumble, the earth seemed to tremble. The golden light dissipated. The Yama Kings secretly cheered. Their confidence swelled. The combined strength of the 9 of them was not as weak as they thought. This attack was very sharp. They looked at each other and activated the Yama King's seals. Immediately, the Yama King's seals expanded and turned into 9 mountains. They pressed down on Dizang of Goguryeo. Dizang of Goguryeo's expression did not change. He chanted the Kitagarbha Sutra. Lines of golden Sanskrit words flowed out of his mouth and intertwined to form a huge swastika. This swastika was like a huge net flying towards the sky, as if it wanted to wrap around the 9 mountains. However, the difference in size between the two sides was too great. The swastika seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow. But no one thought so. After all, they had just seen the power of the swastika. The Azura was still pressed to the ground and could not turn around. Boom! Another loud sound. Golden light overflowed, and the black light of Yama King's seal spread in all directions. Both sides seemed to be evenly matched in this attack. But the Yama Kings did not stop. They activated their powers. The Yama King's seals shone brightly and turned into a huge whirlpool. It was pitch black, as if it wanted to swallow everything. The Yama King's seals were the most powerful treasures of the Yama Kings. Not only did it turn into a mountain, it could also absorb souls. It was a powerful weapon for absorbing souls. The Yama King's seals turned into a whirlpool. The sky changed color, and the wind howled. Whirlpools appeared out of thin air. Ah! Those ghosts who were waiting to be reincarnated screamed. They did not have any powers. How could they resist the Yama King's seals that were like their nemesis? Not only the ghosts, even the ghost generals and ghost messengers stationed here could not escape the same fate. They screamed and flew into the sky. The Yama Kings did not stop. The Yama King's seals were aimed at Dizang of Goguryeo, trying to suck his soul into it. The Kitagarbha Bodhisattva's face suddenly darkened, and his anger gradually became apparent. He said, "You dare to disregard the souls of the innocent. What qualifications do you have to be the master of a region and command millions of lives?" The Kitagarbha Bodhisattva's hand gestures changed. He formed a mudra with both hands. Boundless golden light was born from the mudra. Like the sun, it shot in all directions. Immediately, it illuminated this part of the gloomy sky. The golden light was too bright. It enveloped Dizang of Goguryeo completely. Suddenly, an even more intense golden light penetrated through. It overshadowed the original golden light. Everyone looked at it. The Kasaya on Dizang of Goguryeo flew up. It slowly rose into the sky. The golden light was dazzling. Dizang of Goguryeo pointed his finger. The Kasaya flew toward the Yama King's gate. Dizang of Goguryo's voice was like a huge bell. It rumbled, scarier than thunder. Vajra's glare, endless Kasaya, kill. Dizang of Goguryo's eyes widened in anger. He floated in the air without moving. However, the Kasaya moved. This Kasaya was called the Endless Kasaya. It was endless and boundless. Before the Yama Kings could understand what was going on, the Kasaya flew above their heads. It even covered the whirlpool created by the Yama King's seal. The Kasaya did not look big. However, when it was spread out, it was really endless. It covered a large part of the sky above their heads. The whirlpool of the Yama King's seal was like a small dot in front of the Kasaya. What kind of treasure is this? They looked at each other in dismay, their hearts beating like drums. It was because the magical force transmitted from this endless monastic robe was too shocking. What are you afraid of? We have so many people. Let's fight. Seeing that the morale of the army was in chaos, the Yama Kings could not bear to look at it. They quickly tried to boost their morale. These words were very effective. The Yama Kings came to their senses. This was a battle with their backs to the river. They could only fight and not retreat. Kill. Chapter 1367. The King of Hell went all out and unleashed the greatest power of the King of Hell's seal. The infinite cassock was a sage artifact. It covered the sky and the earth with dazzling golden light. It did not give the King of Hell's seal a chance to unleash its power. The 9 vortexes seemed to be sucking the sky into them. Its power was terrifying. The infinite cassock's golden light was no less powerful than the vortexes. It completely enveloped the vortexes and descended. Boom! A tornado formed in the middle of the vortexes. Then, tornadoes flew out from the other vortexes. The sky was completely occupied by the 9 tornadoes, covering the sky and the sun. Those ghosts were like duckweed, flying towards the terrifying tornadoes. Once they were sucked in, their souls would be destroyed. Thus, deafening screams resounded through the sky, making one's hair stand on end. Dizang of Goguryo's eyes were wide open with anger. He chanted and his hand's seals changed constantly. The infinite cassock was not afraid of the 9 tornadoes at all. Boom! Finally, a tornado struck the infinite monastic robe. The monastic robe fluttered and swayed, but it immediately stabilized. Golden light sprinkled down, and the black tornadoes were immediately dyed golden. The screams of the ghosts that were attracted stopped abruptly. Their eyes became extremely calm. Although the King of Hell's seal was still unleashing its power, it seemed that in their eyes, the King of Hell's seal was not scary at all. The tornadoes were completely dyed golden by the golden light. They shone brightly, and the speed of the tornadoes decreased sharply. Crack! With a crisp sound, cracks appeared on the tornadoes. They spread rapidly and soon covered the entire tornadoes. In the end, the tornado exploded with a loud bang, turning into specks of golden light that drifted in the air. The ghosts that were attracted to the King of Hell's seal were freed and cheered. The tornadoes were connected to the King of Hell's seal. When the tornadoes shattered, the terrifying power spread directly to the King of Hell's seal. Crack! The heaven-grade King of Hell's seal flashed and a crack appeared on it. Finally, in the dazzling light, the King of Hell's seal broke into 2 and was completely destroyed. Pfft! A King of Hell spat out a mouthful of blood. His expression immediately became dispirited. It was obvious that he had been severely injured. Upon seeing this, the other Yama Kings roared as they frantically activated their Yama seals in an attempt to save Chinye's life. However, rays of golden light fell from the infinite monastic robe. In an instant, the world was completely occupied by the golden light, especially the 8 golden pillars of light that descended from the sky. The energy they contained was awe-inspiring. The 8 golden lights and the 8 tornadoes attacked each other, and the tornadoes were completely dyed gold in a short while. With the previous example, the kings of hell immediately understood that they were no match for Dizang of Goguryeo. Their confidence just now was just self-deception. What should we do? The Yama kings glanced at one another, unable to come up with a suitable answer. No one said anything because they had already realized that this was a matter of life and death. Before they could make up their minds, Dizang of Goguryeo had already made up his mind. He chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, and the endless cassock shone with golden light. The 8 tornadoes were completely dyed golden and exploded. The tornadoes disappeared, and the 8 Yama seals were destroyed along with them. The heaven-grade treasures, the most precious treasures of the kings of hell, were defeated in less than 10 minutes by the infinite monastic robe. Furthermore, those treasures were completely removed from the stage. Puff, 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 the kings of hell vomited blood one after another, as if they were about to vomit out their internal organs. Their faces were as pale as paper as they looked at the infinite monastic robe in the sky in disbelief. The infinite monastic robe was slowly descending. Without the resistance of the Yama seals, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. One could imagine how they felt. Song Jianguang was completely shocked by this scene. He was subdued by Dizang of Goguryeo's cultivation. He had a lingering fear, and his back was drenched in cold sweat. If he had stubbornly persisted, or if he had not won the bet, would he have suffered the same fate as these kings of hell? There were no ifs in everything. He had almost walked through the gates of hell and his soul had almost been destroyed. Song Jianguang's mouth trembled a few times. He looked at Dizang of Goguryeo with more and more fear in his eyes. One by one, the kings of hell vomited blood, and their auras became very weak. Looking at the infinite monastic robe descending from the sky, they felt as if there was a knife hanging over their necks that could fall and take their lives at any time. They could not care less about their injuries. Without the Yama seals, they still had a lot of abilities. Although they were not as powerful as the Yama seals, their power was still not to be underestimated. Thus, the 9 kings of hell formed seals and cast spells. A terrifying gloomy aura spread out from their bodies. Not long after, these auras merged together and turned into a huge ferocious ghost head. This ghost head seemed to occupy half the sky. It was several times larger than the mountain that the Yama seals had turned into. At a glance, it felt very small. The infinite monastic robe bloomed with golden light. Its aura did not diminish as it quickly descended. Roar! The ghost head roared at the sky. Energy surged as if it was going to devour everything in the world. Dizang of Goguryeo's expression did not change. He did not take this terrifying scene seriously at all. He chanted, and the mysterious Ksitigarbha Sutra spurted out from his mouth. It turned into golden Sanskrit words and flew onto the infinite monastic robe. Immediately, the infinite monastic robe shone brightly. Its speed of descent increased greatly, and it collided head-on with the ghost head. The infinite monastic robe shrank inwards and immediately wrapped around the ghost head. The sinister and terrifying energy was immediately covered by the golden light. Bang bang bang. The ghost head was struggling in the monastic robe. It kept crashing and trying to break out. However, all of its efforts were in vain. The infinite monastic robe's golden light was too dazzling. It was not something that the ghost head could break through. When the kings of hell saw this, their hearts immediately fell into a bottomless abyss. Their weak auras became hurried, and they panted like a cow. Kill! Suddenly, one of the kings of hell shouted and rushed toward the infinite monastic robe without caring about his own safety. Bang! A ray of golden light shot out from the infinite monastic robe and hit the king of hell. A huge black hole appeared in the king of hell's chest, and he flew out like a cannonball. While he was still in midair, his eyes were staring at his chest in disbelief. There were bits and pieces of golden light in the black hole. The golden light spread in all directions. Soon, the king of hell's body was completely covered by the golden light, and he turned into a golden man. Crack! A crack spread from the inside out to the outside of his body. Soon, the cracks covered his entire body. In the end, he shattered into pieces of golden light and scattered in all directions. The other kings of hell looked as if they were struck by lightning. They looked at this scene in a daze, as if they did not expect their comrade to be so weak. The kings of hell were fighting with their backs to the wall. The pressure they were under was already extremely great. This scene was like the last straw that broke the camel's back. Fear quickly spread in their hearts. He really dares to kill us? This thought appeared in the kings of hell's mind. If they still had a trace of hope before, this scene clearly told them that Dizang of Goguryeo really wanted to kill them. Chapter 1368. The kings of hell panicked as fear weighed down on their hearts. Finally, someone couldn't take it anymore and gave up on attacking, shouting, "Dizang of Goguryeo, I surrender. I will turn back from the sea of bitterness, please let me go." "Yes, I surrender as well." Several kings of hell surrendered one after another. Although they were usually high and mighty, they were not as powerful as they had imagined. Seeing this, King Yama was both embarrassed and angry. He roared in a low voice, "Are you still king of hell? You're actually begging for mercy. Where's your status? Where's your courage? If you lose your life, what's the value of your status and courage?" A king of hell resentfully retorted. King Yama was speechless. He had no way of stopping others, but he could choose to stand. Even if he died, he would still die standing. After all, he was the leader of the 10 kings of hell. There was a big difference between him and the other kings of hell. He stood proudly and stared straight at Dizang of Goguryeo, saying, "If you want to take everything from me, you have to step over my corpse." Dizang of Goguryeo did not answer him. Instead, he lightly flew towards him. He stretched out his hand and a golden light blossomed from his fingertips. The light was so bright that it was almost impossible to open one's eyes. Everyone looked at the golden light and the shock and fear in their hearts increased. They couldn't help but lower their heads. So. Golden light suddenly appeared and flew out, dyeing the sky golden. Puff puff puff. Rays of golden light entered their bodies and blood splattered everywhere. A few figures shook violently as their eyes were filled with disbelief. "Dizang of Goguryeo, you," one by one, weak voices sounded out and then stopped abruptly. Then, the sound of people falling to the ground rang out one after another. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at all of this indifferently and said calmly, "The sea of bitterness is boundless, not everyone can turn back. Put down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha. This is just your wishful thinking." The Yama king stared at the fallen Yama kings around him. The shock in his heart was truly unimaginable. If it wasn't for the last bit of courage supporting him, he would have already collapsed to the ground. Why did you kill them?" The king Yenluo stammered as he finally asked the question in his heart. Dizang of Goguryeo looked at him deeply and said, "You have enslaved the ghost realm for so many years, and now you want to lay down your butcher's knife? Not only will I not agree to it, but the living beings of the ghost world will also never agree to it." The king of hell felt a chill in his heart as he impatiently asked, "Didn't you say that the sea of bitterness is boundless and that repentance is the shore?" "You are not qualified." Dizang of Goguryeo's expression did not change, and his hand shone with a bright golden light again. The Yama king instantly felt the threat of death. His expression drastically changed as he spoke, "You even want to kill me? Are you any different from them?" Dizang of Goguryeo asked. The Yama king was speechless. He was truly no different from the other Yama kings. In fact, his deeds far surpassed theirs. Therefore, he did not have any special privileges. Suddenly, his gaze turned and saw Song Jiangwang, who was safe and sound. His heart trembled as he pointed at him and asked, "Then what about Song Jiangwang?" Dizang of Goguryeo glanced at Song Jiangwang from the corner of his eye. Song Jiangwang's expression changed drastically as he cursed the king of hell in his heart. He was about to die, yet he still didn't stop and wanted to drag him down. He hurriedly wanted to explain and separate himself from the Dizang of Goguryeo. However, He heard Dizang of Goguryeo faintly say, "He is no different from you. It's just that he has a little cleverness, so he doesn't have to die for the time being." Why? The king of hell was furious. This is not fair. Didn't you say that all living things are equal? Of course it's fair. Dizang of Goguryeo retorted, "His sins are almost the same as yours, but he doesn't believe in my ideals. Therefore, I will let him witness my success and let him know that he is wrong. In the future, he will follow in your footsteps and tell you that he is wrong. Moreover, he is very wrong." What? Song Jianguang turned pale with fright as he screamed. He had always thought that he was lucky enough to escape this calamity, but he didn't expect that his thinking was too beautiful. His little thoughts didn't escape the eyes of Dizang of Goguryeo at all. In other words, Dizang of Goguryeo didn't care about his little thoughts at all. Because, he already had a plan. When the king of hell heard this, he revealed a smile and looked at Song Jianguang mockingly, as if saying, "You betrayed us, but you still have to die. This is your fate." Song Jianguang's expression became extremely ugly. The sharp sword hanging above his head still didn't disappear. Once Dizang of Goguryeo succeeded in transforming the ghost realm, it would be the time of his death. "Song Jianguang, I'll wait for you." The king of hell smiled mockingly at Song Jianguang, then looked at the king of hell and said resolutely, "You don't need to do anything." Boom! As soon as his voice fell, the king of hell exploded, turning into strands of yin qi as his soul scattered. Of the 10 kings of hell, only Song Jianguang was left. Song Jianguang stood in place in a daze, as if he could also smell the scent of death. He looked at the strands of yin qi in a daze. "No, I can't give up just like this. I have to survive." Dizang of Goguryeo vowed that when he succeeds, it will be the time of my death. If he never succeeds, then I won't die. Song Jianguang had a flash of inspiration and immediately found a flaw, regaining his vitality. Dizang of Goguryo's gaze turned and walked towards the Azura, saying, "Azura, your intelligence has been awakened. I will convert you." Roar, the Azura roared, expressing his anger. Dizang of Goguryo acted as if he didn't see it and said, "In the future, you will thank me." With that, a golden light flashed and the endless Kasaya descended from the sky, wrapping around the Azura. With a flash of golden light, the Azura disappeared. The endless Kasaya flew back to Dizang of Goguryo. Wearing the Kasaya, it shone with a golden light, making people unable to look at it directly. Dizang of Goguryo ignored the Azura and faced Li Xiaotian, saying, "Now, you will witness my success." Li Xiaotian stubbornly raised his head. His tears had long since dried up as he stared straight at Dizang of Goguryo. His unyielding attitude was obvious. Dizang of Goguryo didn't care. With a wave of his hand, Li Xiaotian flew up lightly and entered the teleportation array with him. Song Jianguang seemed to have awoken from a dream and quickly chased after them. With a flash of light, the teleportation array opened and the three disappeared. Tang Jing fell as if there was no end. After an unknown period of time, there was finally a glimmer of light in front of him. Splash! Water splashed everywhere as he fell into the water. He suddenly held his breath and popped his head out of the water. Where is this? He hurriedly looked around. There was no end, it was all water. He didn't know where the end was. It seemed to be bigger than the sea he had seen before. Maybe I can see the whole picture if I fly up to the sky. He had an idea. He urged his mana and tried to fly up. Splash! A series of water splashed everywhere, but he couldn't fly up. It used to be an easy task, but now it was impossible. What was going on? He looked around blankly. His hands flapped in the water. There seemed to be a force of attraction in the water, firmly binding him, making him unable to break out of the water. He couldn't help but think of the river Styx. Nothing in the river Styx could float. It was full of strangeness just like the water. Obviously, this wasn't the river Styx. Because, he could float. He forced his brain to calm down and carefully analyzed his situation. Dizang of Goguryeo made a crack in the ground, and then he fell through the crack. This is the depths of the ghost realm? The ghost realm doesn't have magma like the human world, but it's such a desert. He didn't know that this was the sea of bitterness that Dizang of Goguryeo mentioned. Dizang of Goguryeo had been in the 18 layers of hell for countless years. The 18 layers of hell was the deepest place in the ghost realm, and it was also the closest to the earth's core. When Dizang of Goguryeo mastered his technique, he sensed that there was such a boundless ocean in the depths of the earth's core. The ocean was as big as the ghost realm. Dizang of Goguryeo named this ocean as the Sea of Bitterness. Moreover, he used his supreme magical power to support the Sea of Bitterness and set up layers of restrictions. Other than him, no one could reach the Sea of Bitterness. In addition, once someone was trapped in the Sea of Bitterness, they would wander in this boundless Sea of Bitterness, alone and without anyone to rely on, as if they were abandoned by the world. The only way to leave the Sea of Bitterness was to turn back. This turning back was not just to twist one's neck and look back, but it had a deeper meaning. The Sea of Misery was augmented by the Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva's divine ability. Only by comprehending the profound meaning augmented by the Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva and comprehending its essence could one truly turn back. Only then would one be able to break through the restriction and return to the surface. Tang Zheng still didn't know all this. After analyzing it, he still couldn't figure it out, so he simply swam in the Sea of Bitterness. He didn't believe that this Sea of Bitterness had no end. As long as he found the end, he might be able to find a way to leave this place. At the same time, he had a lot of complaints about Dizang of Goguryeo in his heart. What was the purpose of trapping him here and falling to the ground? What would he do to Li Xiaotian? He shouldn't hurt Li Xiaotian. Tang Zheng pondered nervously, I must leave here as soon as possible and save her. As he swam, he urged his power, trying to break free from the restraint of the seawater. His power was running freely, but he still couldn't get out of the seawater. This made him very upset, but he also understood that this Sea of Bitterness was definitely not as simple as he thought. Swim, swim, swim without knowing where the end was. He swam tirelessly as if he wanted to keep swimming until he died. Tang Zheng was already numb. He didn't remember how long he had swam, but he still couldn't see the shore. He stopped dispiritedly, wanting to cry but having no tears. This must be a spell. As long as I break this spell, I might be able to escape. Tang Zheng thought to himself, but he didn't give up. It was easy to say, but easier said than done. He held his head and racked his brains, but only managed to figure out a little. This Sea of Bitterness probably had no end, which meant that there was no shore. It was just like what Dizang of Goguryeo said, the Sea of Bitterness had no end. The Sea of Bitterness has no end? His heart trembled, and his eyes lit up a little. He remembered that Dizang of Goguryeo had been rambling on about how the Sea of Bitterness had no end, and turning back was the shore. Could this be the Sea of Bitterness? He thought for a while and was sure that his guess was probably not far from the truth. The Sea of Bitterness has no end, and turning back was the shore. He suddenly turned his head back. Where was the shore? It was still the endless sea. He slowly turned his head again, but it was still the boundless sea. Where is the shore? Where is the shore? Turning back was the shore. It's all a lie. He used all his strength and shouted hysterically. Chapter 1369. Anger, helplessness, hesitation, pain. All kinds of emotions tormented Tang Zheng. Fortunately, his nerves were strong enough. Otherwise, in this desolate place, he would have broken down. He had someone he cared about in his heart, so naturally, he would not break down so easily. He had to find a way to leave this damned place. He had already tried many methods, but none of them worked. The Sea of Bitterness is boundless, turn back to the shore. He kept repeating this sentence, certain that the mystery was in this sentence. But how to turn back was a big problem. Could the answer be in the Ksitigarbha Sutra? He had an idea, and his mouth naturally began to recite the Ksitigarbha Sutra. Sanskrit after Sanskrit words came out of his mouth. The golden light emitted by the Sanskrit words dyed the sea of bitterness golden. The golden light rippled, as if he was in a golden world. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was recited over and over again. More and more Sanskrit words appeared, falling into the sea and disappearing. He was very familiar with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. As the saying goes, reading 100 times will reveal its meaning. When he recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra over and over again, he was more and more convinced that the Ksitigarbha Sutra was the key to leaving the sea of bitterness. He recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra tirelessly. More and more Sanskrit words flew out of his mouth, surrounding his entire body. After a while, he became a golden man, completely surrounded by Sanskrit words, shining with golden light. He simply closed his eyes, but he saw the golden light penetrate his skin bit by bit, drilling into his body. His body only had one main meridian, the 8 main meridians were completely destroyed. His body structure was very different from ordinary people. The golden light penetrated his skin, muscles, and bones, and merged into the only main meridian left. After a while, the main meridian was also dyed in gold. Boom! Suddenly, the energy in the meridian became violent. Back then, he absorbed the energy of the 9 souls of the golden crow. Although with Li Xiaotian's pure yin energy, he succeeded in harmonizing the pure yang energy. But this energy was not completely refined, it was only temporarily stored in the body. When the golden light rushed in, it clashed with the energy, and both sides became restless. The two energies clashed, both trying to suppress the other. Tang Zheng let out a low roar of pain. Of course, he wouldn't just stand by and watch them run amok. He immediately urged his true qi and aggressively rushed over. The 3 energies clashed and entangled with each other, and the situation immediately changed dramatically. The true energy and the golden crow energy did not repel each other. Instead, they cooperated with each other. The golden crow energy threw away its armor and fled in all directions. The 2 energies chased after each other, refining the golden crow's energy. The golden crow's energy fled even faster, but the meridians were only so big. In the end, the golden crow's energy could not escape. The refined golden crow energy turned into 2 types of energy. One was true energy, and the other was golden energy. This golden energy was born from the Ksitigarbha Sutra. It was a type of Buddhist energy. As it increased, the golden light on Tang Zheng's body became more and more intense. Tang Zheng's cultivation had already reached the 9th stage of the divine transformation realm. He was only 1 step away from the great realization realm. As the true energy in his body increased, there were signs of him breaking through this threshold. He was extremely happy. This was really a blessing in disguise. Although he was trapped in the sea of suffering, if his cultivation improved, there was no doubt that he would have a greater chance of escaping this sea of suffering. However, his joy did not last long. This was because when the true energy increased and seemed to be about to break through the limit, the golden energy suddenly exploded. It actually suppressed the true energy, causing it to be unable to grow any further. On the contrary, the golden energy seemed to have gone crazy as it rapidly grew. In an instant, Tang Zheng's internal organs and 8 extraordinary meridians were completely occupied by the golden energy. The true energy and the golden crow's energy were all pushed to a corner. Tang Zheng was dumbfounded. What was going on? Why was the golden energy so strong? He hurriedly urged his energy, and the ancient clear heaven scroll quickly began to circulate. At the same time, the heavenly book also began to circulate quietly. The ancient clear heaven scroll was the general outline of the heavenly book. When the ancient clear heaven scroll was completed, the heavenly book would naturally circulate in succession. The heavenly book was a supreme technique that allowed one to peek into the heavenly Tao and become a heavenly emperor. It was a technique that only the heavenly emperors of each generation could cultivate. Its power could be imagined. Suddenly, the true energy seemed to have changed, and it actually stopped the trend of being defeated. With the circulation of the heavenly book, the power of the true energy increased greatly. It actually counterattacked and forced the golden energy to stop. The two completely different energies went from cooperating to confronting each other. All of these changes were too mysterious. Tang Zheng was dazzled. For a moment, he could not guess the profound meaning of this change or what it meant. However, the true energy had stopped the trend of being defeated, which made him very relieved. After all, this was the result of his countless years of cultivation. Of course, he did not want to be defeated by the golden energy. He did not know that these two completely different energies were of different attributes. The true energy belonged to the heavenly way, which was abbreviated as Tao energy. The other was the power of Buddhism, which was abbreviated as Buddhist energy. The Buddhist energy and the Tao energy seemed to directly regard each other as opponents. They were confronting each other and did not give in at all. They both wanted to defeat each other. This was also because Tang Zheng was big enough and did not investigate the reason. If the Dizang of Goguryeo saw this scene, he would definitely investigate deeply. It turned out that Tao and Buddhism were incompatible. When the Tao energy and the Buddhist energy collided, they both refined the Golden Crow's energy and replenished themselves. Tang Zheng's body became the battlefield. For a moment, his mind was completely immersed, as if he had forgotten that he was in a sea of suffering. In the world of spirits and souls, earth-shaking changes were happening rapidly. When the Dizang of Goguryeo returned again, everything had changed. He was no longer silently delivering all living beings. Instead, he was making a big fuss. Although Song Jiangwang's little trick was seen through, the Dizang of Goguryeo still selflessly gave him the power to become the right-hand man of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Song Jiangwang became his emissary to deliver all living beings from torment. Wherever the emissary went, the power of Buddha rippled, and batch after batch of ghosts were converted, becoming the most loyal followers of Xidigarbha. Li Xiaotian looked on coldly, as if all of this had nothing to do with her. However, the Dizang of Goguryeo did not want her to stay out of it. He actually taught her the Xidigarbha Sutra and made her an emissary to spread his beliefs and Buddhism for him. Li Xiaotian originally refused, but when she thought about how she was now weak and was just a ghost, if she did not cultivate, she would not be able to help Tang Zheng. Therefore, she changed her mind and practiced the Xidigarbha Sutra diligently. The Dizang of Goguryeo did not hide anything. He guided her in the cultivation of the Xidigarbha Sutra, and her cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. The Xidigarbha Sutra was not the same as ordinary cultivation techniques. It focused on epiphany. Before epiphany, there was no specific cultivation level. Once epiphany, powerful cultivation would come uninvited. This was just like the Dizang of Goguryeo, who directly advanced to the Mahayana realm after an epiphany. Although Li Xiaotian cultivated the Xidigarbha Sutra, she did not work for the Dizang of Goguryeo in good faith. She did not do her best to spread Buddhism for him. On the contrary, the followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo who followed her spared no effort in spreading the news. She was like a bystander, witnessing the increase of the Dizang of Goguryeo's followers little by little. Many a little makes a mickle, and water makes a sea. These followers gathered into an ocean, and the belief that all living beings were equal was deeply rooted in their hearts. This spread was very successful. Without the obstruction of the 10 kings of hell, it was almost like a spark of fire starting a prairie fire. Li Xiaotian witnessed all of this, but her belief was not shaken in the slightest. All of this seemed to indicate that in the next moment, all living beings would be equal in the world of spirits and souls, and everyone would be followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo. Song Jiangwang was in despair. It seemed that he had underestimated the influence of the Dizang of Goguryeo and the power of the Xidigarbha Sutra. Once the spread was complete, his life would come to an end. However, he was helpless. Under the eyes of the followers of the Dizang of Goguryeo, there was no way to stop all of this. Even slacking off would not have much effect. The Dizang of Goguryeo seemed to believe that success was imminent. However, things did not go as planned, and a turning point appeared. An opposing force appeared out of nowhere. This force not only had vested interests in the original world of spirits and souls, but also the most ordinary ghost citizens. The world of spirits and souls did not only have vested interests like the 10 kings of hell, but there were vested interests in every class. Although most of them were converted, a small number of them finally chose to rebel. This rebel force and the converted force had a fierce confrontation, and both sides suffered casualties. This immediately thwarted the Dizang of Goguryyo's plan. This was also like a spark of fire. At the beginning, other rebel forces also emerged and fought fiercely with the followers. The world of spirits and souls was in chaos. This was completely beyond the expectations of the Dizang of Goguryo. However, he was not angry because he firmly believed that the rebel forces were just a flash in the pan, and he would eventually achieve the final victory. He had to achieve the final victory. Song Jianguang was overjoyed. He almost jumped up and cheered. This was what he had dreamt of. He prayed silently in his heart, hoping that the resistance forces could hold on a little longer and not be destroyed by Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva. In fact, Song Jianguang did not believe that the rebel forces would be useful. At most, they were just stalling for time. As long as the Dizang of Goguryo struck, they would definitely fall apart and suffer a crushing defeat. Li Xiaotian was different. When she heard about the rebel forces, her heart was set. This meant that her judgment was the same. No matter how powerful the Dizang of Goguryo was, it was impossible for him to convert every single one of them and destroy every single rebel force. Humans were different individuals and had their own personalities. The world of spirits and souls was no exception. Therefore, to unify everyone's thoughts, there might be a certain degree of success, but it would never be a complete success. This was a truth that went against the laws and human nature, and had been tested by countless history. Li Xiaotian cultivated the Ksitigarbha Sutra. She did not believe in the philosophy of the Dizang of Goguryo, but she did not reject the Ksitigarbha Sutra. The Ksitigarbha Sutra was a scripture, and naturally, it was all-inclusive. It also had the concept of salvation and equality. She absorbed it selectively and actually benefited a lot. The Dizang of Goguryo did not sit idly by. He saw that there were more and more signs of resistance, especially in the wilderness outside the cities. There were especially many rebel forces. Chapter 1371. The Heavenly Realm. A cheer rang out in this world. Tang Zheng hesitated for a long time before finally naming this new world. A deep sense of pride arose spontaneously. This was his world. He was the creator of this world, the well-deserved god of this world. In the future, when my skills improve, I must make this world full of vitality. Not just some grass, but all kinds of spirit beasts and immortal herbs. Perhaps, my people can also live in this world. No one can threaten them. This thought was deeply rooted in the depths of his mind, causing his heart to palpitate. If this was really realized, then he could keep the enemy out. This world opened this door because of the combination of the sky-devouring technique and the Heavenly Book. The Heavenly Book is not under my control. Since the Emperor of Heaven and Li Xiaotian both know it, I must not leak the sky-devouring technique. Otherwise, the enemy can also come to the heavenly realm by combining these two techniques. Then, I won't be the only one who controls the heavenly realm. Tang Zheng was very smart. He immediately thought of this key point and became deeply vigilant. The most important part of the sky-devouring technique was hidden in the Langya Pavilion. Other than the Dragon Clan, humans could not enter at all. This ensured that he was the only one who could truly cultivate the sky-devouring technique. He could barely suppress his excitement. Unable to explore more information about the heavenly realm, his divine sense simply returned to the real world. In the sea of bitterness, he floated in the sea. Golden and green light mixed all over his body. The green light was the light emitted by his vital qi. It formed a sharp contrast with the golden light emitted by the Buddhist power. In the 9th main meridian, the confrontation between the Buddhist power and the Tao power had reached a white-hot stage. No one was giving in to the other. They had completely refined the energy of the Golden Crow's soul and made it a part of them. This caused Tang Jing to still be stuck at the threshold of the Mahayana realm. The Buddhist power and the Tao power were almost the same. Both had reached the 9th stage of the divine transformation realm. However, because neither side had broken through, Tang Zheng's cultivation did not increase. However, in the dark, Tang Zheng had a clear feeling that his strength was increasing. When he activated the heavenly book, the Tao power, which was his vital qi, flowed freely. When he chanted the Ksitigarbha Sutra, the Buddhist power was also like an arm. The two energies actually obeyed his command. These two completely different energies coexisted in his body, creating a strange scene. When Dizang of Goguryeo imparted the Ksitigarbha Sutra to him, he never dreamed that such a scene would occur. Dizang of Goguryeo was very confident in his Ksitigarbha Sutra. He believed that if Tang Jing recited the Ksitigarbha Sutra day and night, he would definitely be influenced by the sutra and be converted. This so-called enlightenment was a change from the inside to the outside. The consciousness would change, and the body would also undergo earth-shattering changes. The true qi that he had cultivated for many years would be converted into Buddhist power by the Ksitigarbha meridians. This was a secret that many people did not know about. Dizang of Goguryeo did not point it out either. Dizang of Goguryeo had always believed that his Ksitigarbha Sutra was the true essence of the great Tao of heaven and earth. It was only natural for him to convert other powers. Furthermore, it was a matter of great benefit to Tang Zheng. This was a benefit to Tang Zheng, not a harm to him. Therefore, Ksitigarbha Bodhisattva had a kind heart. Dizang of Goguryeo definitely did not expect that Tang Zheng would coincidentally obtain a supreme technique, the heavenly book, which could actually be on par with the Ksitigarbha Sutra. As a result, a huge balance appeared in Tang Zheng's body, allowing the two energies to coexist. Of course, this coexistence was not a peaceful coexistence. It was a confrontation. However, no one could do anything to the other. Tang Zheng did not have the mood to think about this. After seeing the two energies go through a white-hot confrontation, they still could not do anything to each other. They actually gradually subsided. He simply ignored them. After all, they could not hurt him for the time being. All his thoughts were on the sea of bitterness. If he could get out of this sea of bitterness, that was the most important thing. Previously, he thought that the Ksitigarbha Sutra was the key to getting out of this sea of bitterness. Now, it seemed that he was too optimistic. Although the Ksitigarbha Sutra had brought about many changes, it did not allow him to escape from this hellish place. Looking at the vast sea of bitterness, he was almost desperate. Whether it was the heavenly book or the Ksitigarbha Sutra, there was no way out. Was he really going to be trapped in the sea of bitterness forever? Li Xiaotian was still waiting for him to save her. If he did not appear, what if something bad happened to her? Even if she was safe, what if she was reincarnated? If she drank Meng Po's soup and reincarnated, then what was the use of him finding her? What if she was reincarnated as a man? Did he still have to love a man? He struggled in the sea of bitterness in distress. Time flew by, and he was at his wits' end. The human world changed too quickly. In the world of spirits and souls, the storm had not yet subsided. Instead, it was becoming more and more intense. However, Dizang of Goguryeo's supernatural power was unparalleled. In the end, he suppressed most of the resistance forces, leaving only a small group of resistance forces to hide. Li Xiaotian followed Dizang of Goguryeo to fight in the north and south. Her footprints almost measured every corner of the world of spirits and souls. The vastness of the world of spirits and souls was difficult to cover in a word. After she had seen so much, her state of mind had undergone earth-shaking changes. In the past, she was resourceful and far-sighted. She thought of what others thought, and even thought of things that others did not. Now, she could almost be called a demon. Her wisdom was so profound that it made people tremble in fear. She had advised Dizang of Goguryeo several times and analyzed the situation. Compared to Dizang of Goguryeo, she was even better. This made Dizang of Goguryeo look at her in a new light. Song Jianguang, who had always thought of himself as wise and responsible, saw this scene. He suddenly felt like the waves behind the Yangtze River slapped the front on the beach. His role seemed to be getting smaller and smaller. However, Dizang of Goguryeo still did not deprive him of his identity as an emissary. It seemed that he wanted him to witness Dizang of Goguryeo's success wholeheartedly. Li Xiaotian did not pledge allegiance to Dizang of Goguryeo. She still insisted on her beliefs. However, she practiced her strategy in actual combat and gained a lot. The world of spirits and souls was equivalent to a battlefield for her to practice. However, she was certain that no matter how powerful her strategy was, no matter how powerful it would not be able to completely extinguish the flames of resistance. In fact, it was true. She occasionally missed Tang Zheng. She knew that Dizang of Goguryeo had locked Tang Zheng in the Sea of Suffering. However, she did not know how to get to the Sea of Suffering. She concentrated on comprehending the Ksitagarbha Sutra. It seemed that she hoped that the Ksitagarbha Sutra could give her courage and lead her to the Sea of Suffering. After all, Dizang of Goguryeo cultivated the Sea of Suffering. Therefore, he could freely trap people in the Sea of Suffering. If she also concentrated on cultivating the Ksitagarbha Sutra, maybe one day the Ksitagarbha Sutra would give her the answer. Dizang of Goguryeo's deep eyes often stared at Li Xiaotian for a long time. He did not say a word. In fact, he did not even say a word in the end. However, he had seen through Li Xiaotian's thoughts. He did not object, or rather, he did not make it public. He believed that Li Xiaotian's devout comprehension of the Ksitagarbha Sutra would one day be converted by the Ksitagarbha Sutra. Tang Zheng had long forgotten the concept of time. His mind was sometimes immersed in the Sea of Suffering. Sometimes he went to the heavenly realm. He wandered back and forth between the two worlds. Suddenly, when his gaze stopped on those small grasses, his gaze stopped, and he was firmly attracted to them. Those small grasses were just an attempt for him to realize. He did not take it to heart. After all, for a person, the small grasses were really an ordinary existence. They were really not worth paying too much attention to. Therefore, when his gaze inadvertently fell on the small grasses this time, the shock in his eyes was indescribable. What's going on? He was stunned. His pair of eyes were completely occupied by the small grasses. Small grasses? Is this still the small grasses that I created? He muttered to himself. In fact, he would actively sense any movement in the world of spirits and souls, or rather, any change. However, this time, he did not have a way for a long time. He was impatient and his mind was almost completely occupied by how to get away. Therefore, it caused a sudden change. It was precisely this sudden change that made him so surprised that his jaw almost fell into the Sea of Suffering. He saw that the originally most ordinary grasses in the world had undergone earth-shaking changes. The stems and leaves had become larger, green, and exuded a faint green light. This was a situation that would not appear in the human world. Even if there was a genetic mutation, such an outrageous thing would never happen. These were not small grasses. They were simply something else. This was not the most surprising thing. He was more amazed by the strong aura on the small grasses. Generally, spiritual grasses that were created by heaven and earth would contain spiritual energy, such as the heaven-fragrant flower that he picked on ordinary balance. Because it contained spiritual energy, even the red-chained snake tried to take it for its own, so it guarded it firmly. The aura contained in this mutated small grasses was different from spiritual energy, but it had the same effect. This was because the small grasses emitted the power of stars, which was a higher level of energy than spiritual energy. The power of stars. How can this small grasses emit the power of stars? Tang Zheng did not know whether to laugh or cry. The power of stars was contained in the stars, not in this world. Anyway, he had observed this world for a long time. There was no night, the sky was always bright, and there were no stars. Since there were no stars, where did the power of stars come from? Could it be that this world can produce the power of stars? He suddenly had a whim and immediately focused his energy to sense this world. However, other than the power of stars emitted by the small grasses in front of him, there was not even the slightest trace of the power of stars in the other places. Forget it for now. Since the creatures of this world can produce the power of stars, then it will definitely be beneficial to me. The power of stars is much better than spiritual energy. How can I miss this great opportunity? Thus, he focused all his attention on these small grasses. The power of stars was like wisps of smoke, floating up and disappearing in midair. At the same time, a part of the power of stars immediately appeared in his body. True Qi was not unfamiliar with the power of stars. As soon as it saw it, it immediately refined it. As his cultivation increased, the speed of refining the power of stars also increased greatly. After the small grasses lost the power of stars, they immediately withered and turned into a strand of yellow grass. They did not have their previous spirituality at all. With the power of stars, his true Qi increased greatly. It was like he could break through his limit at any time. He had an epiphany, so he naturally did not want to give up halfway. Although taking away the power of stars would cause the small grasses to wither, he still had to do it. Chapter 1372. Rumble. True Qi surged endlessly and soared into the sky. With a loud bang, the sea of bitterness boiled and set off stormy waves. Tang Zheng's body was covered in green light, overshadowing the golden light. The Buddhist power tried to resist, but found that the surge of true Qi was unstoppable. The vast and mighty power of the stars flowed through his meridians. His Jinqi was like a thirsty baby, constantly absorbing the energy. The Buddhist power witnessed all of this, understood its crisis, and immediately reacted. A burst of Buddhist power entangled the star power, trying to refine it. However, the star power kept colliding, not giving the Buddhist power a chance. The Buddhist power could not restrain it, and could only watch as the star power slipped away and was finally refined into a wisp of true Qi. The power of the stars was different from ordinary energy. Tang Zheng could refine it, but the Buddha's power was powerless. Tang Zheng discovered this point, and was surprised and happy. His true Qi could finally soar into the sky, overshadowing the Buddhist power, so that his cultivation could go further. As soon as the thought came, a change happened. Boom! With a loud bang, the green light completely overshadowed the golden light. The golden light was dying, and finally, it completely disappeared. Tang Zheng bathed in the bright green light, and his eyes were shining. He shouted in an earth-shattering voice, "Mahayana realm." He finally broke through. The star power was the last straw to break through the threshold. He succeeded. The joy was indescribable, and it filled his whole body. His fatigue was swept away, and he seemed to be full of energy and fighting spirit. Roar! He roared to the sky, and a column of water rose into the sky, like a dragon swinging its tail. Is this the first grade of Mahayana realm? He recalled this wonderful world, and his mood was unsettled. Hey, the true Qi is still increasing, and there is no sign of it stopping. Suddenly, he found something strange. His eyes immediately lit up. He was no stranger to this situation. Many times when his cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, this familiar scene would occur. Second grade of Mahayana realm? His eyes were shining, and he was both looking forward to it and muttering excitedly. Boom! Another thunderbolt struck out of the blue, and the green light around his body became a little brighter. He had really broken through and reached the second stage of the Mahayana realm. Inside the 9th main meridian, a vast amount of true Qi was flowing. Although he only had 1 main meridian now, and the amount of true Qi stored was a little less than when he had 9 main meridians, the quality of each strand of true Qi was completely different. This was a qualitative victory, not something that could be covered up by the accumulation of quantity. His true Qi broke through the second bottleneck and finally calmed down. However, Tang Zheng's heart was unable to calm down. Not only had he crossed the threshold to the Grand Ascension stage, but he had also reached the second stage of the Grand Ascension stage, which meant that his cultivation base was on par with the Azura. In the past, he used to persuade the Azura with benefits and emotions. That was the only way to restrain the Azura. Now, he didn't need these illusory things at all. He could use his own strength to suppress the Shura. Aside from the Shura saber being very powerful, the Shura possessed a large amount of Yin Qi that could cause harm to others. Tang Zheng had the 9-Sun Saint constitution, so he was not afraid of Yin Qi at all. Therefore, he was almost invincible against the Shura. He was very clear about this and knew what it meant. Li Xiaotian and the Shura's fate was unknown, so he did not have time to carefully savor the surprise of breaking through. He immediately activated his true Qi. Since his cultivation base had broken through, would it be possible to leave this damned place? The mighty true Qi began to circulate. In an instant, a green light soared into the sky, turning the sea of misery green. Whoosh! The sound of water rang out. He finally rose from the surface of the water and hovered in midair. It turned out that he had no way to escape the shackles of the sea of misery. Now that he had finally succeeded, he was overjoyed and subconsciously turned back. Everything was the same as before. There was no such thing as repenting and being saved. The vast sea of misery still had no end in sight. He could not help but feel gloomy. Damn it, there's no such thing as repenting and being saved. He did not give up. After all, he had flown out of the sea, which was a huge improvement. If his cultivation base improved further, would he be able to completely escape from the sea of misery? However, he did not have the power of the stars now, and there was not enough spiritual energy or power of the stars in the sea of misery for him to cultivate. How could he improve his cultivation base? When he thought of this, his heart almost died. He had almost walked into a dead end. Dizang of Goguryeo, you're really good at trapping me in the sea of misery. How can I escape from the sea of misery? Do you really want me to agree with your idea? No. He immediately shook his head. From the bottom of his heart, he could not believe it. There was no way he could fake it. Looking at the sea of misery below him, he was speechless for a long time. His figure was reflected on the surface of the sea. He was lonely and helpless, as if he had been abandoned by the world. I won't be abandoned by the world. He shook his head absent-mindedly. I have my own world, how can I be abandoned? That's right. He paused for a moment, and his eyes glowed as he stared at the boundless sea of misery. The sea of misery is boundless, repent and you'll be saved. If I make the sea of misery disappear, will I be able to break this spell? This was indeed a wonderful idea, and it was unusually bold. The Dizang of Goguryeo never dreamed that someone would want to make the sea of misery disappear. One must know that the sea of misery was so big that even the Dizang of Goguryeo did not know about it. That was why he sighed about the sea of misery being boundless. Since he had an idea, he naturally had to put it into practice. Thus, Tang Zheng activated his vast and mighty true Qi and used the swallowing heavens technique. A huge black hole appeared out of thin air. This black hole was countless times bigger than before, as if it could devour the world. The sound of the wind immediately rang out. The airflow in the sky was completely sucked into the black hole. In an instant, the wind and clouds changed, and huge waves were set off in the sea. This was caused by the terrifying attraction of the sky-devouring technique. When the moon was close to Earth, it would create a tidal scene, causing the seawater hundreds of thousands of miles away to move. At this moment, the attraction of the black hole in the sky was no less terrifying than the attraction of the moon to Earth. Therefore, the waves immediately soared into the sky, as if they were going to cover the sky. Tang Zheng was surging with emotions, and he secretly regretted it. He was blinded by one's vision. He only thought of using the Ksitigarbha Sutra to escape, but he did not think of using the sky-devouring technique. The sea of misery was a sea. Although the seawater was very strange, the sky-devouring technique had already reached the realm of moving the sea. Wasn't moving the sea of misery within the range of the sky-devouring technique? Once the black holes sucked the sea of misery away, it would be in the heaven realm. The heaven realm was under Tang Zheng's control. No matter how magical the sea of misery was, he had the final say in the heaven realm. The sea of misery churned, and the waves had already soared into the sky, spanning between heaven and earth. At this moment, there were only waves between heaven and earth. The sky had disappeared, and there was only seawater. The black hole was suspended in mid-air, and the waves surged into the black hole one after another. With a whoosh, they disappeared into the black hole. Then, more waves were sucked into the black hole. Tang Zheng's consciousness immediately immersed itself in the heaven realm. It started to rain in the heaven realm, and it kept falling from the sky to the ground. The ground was moistened by the seawater and became moist. It was as if this lifeless world had a trace of vitality because of the appearance of water. There was more and more seawater in the sky, and soon, a layer of water formed in the sky. The seawater did not fall directly from the sky. Instead, it gathered in the sky and only drizzled. Tang Zheng was stunned for a moment. With a thought, the seawater fluctuated violently, and the rain became heavier. However, the layer of water did not collapse in the end. It still stubbornly stayed in midair. He did not seem to be able to control this layer of water like he could control the soil or other energy. This seawater is strange. It's not completely under my control even in the heaven realm, Tang Zheng muttered to himself in puzzlement. Rise. However, he did not stop there. He pointed his finger at the sea and shouted, "Let's go." The seawater was stirred by an invisible force. As expected, it rushed up and turned into a water column that fell from the sky. Boom! 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 A few more water columns fell from the sky. In an instant, the sky and the earth were connected by these water columns. These water columns were like tornadoes, constantly moving. Wherever they passed, they formed canyons. The rain quickly gathered in the canyons, forming rivers that flowed endlessly. More and more water from the bitter sea was sucked into the heaven realm. The water columns became bigger and bigger, as if they were going to occupy the entire heaven realm. The wind and clouds changed, the sky fell and the earth cracked, and the mountains and rivers changed. Tang Zheng saw this scene and seemed to have a feeling. Could the so-called way of heaven be the evolution of the mountains and rivers, the changes of the wind and clouds? This seemed to be a manifestation of the will of the way of heaven. This flash of inspiration made him feel as if he had been struck by lightning. He stared blankly at this scene, but the feeling in his heart became clearer and stronger. He did not know when the heavenly book started to circulate quietly. It echoed with everything that happened in the heaven realm, making his feeling more and more clear. Yes, the way of heaven is contained in all of this. In the past, I've always heard others talk about the way of heaven. In fact, the way of heaven is not complicated. It's just that people think of it as too complicated. The changes in this world are the best manifestation of the way of heaven. As long as I carefully comprehend this series of changes, there will definitely be new discoveries. He was overjoyed, but he gradually suppressed his surging emotions. His mind was completely immersed in all of these changes. The water columns became bigger and bigger, constantly moving. In the end, they gradually gathered together, forming a huge water column that connected the sky and the earth. Boom! The earth trembled and quickly caved in, forming a huge pit. The seawater was completely poured into it, and the water from countless rivers flowed into the pit. The seawater filled the bottom of the pit, but it did not stop. It kept expanding in all directions. In the end, the pit was completely filled with water, forming an ocean. Yes, this was an ocean. Although it was not as boundless as the bitter sea, there was no end to it. However, it was bigger than any ocean in the human world. The naked eye could not see the end of it. Tang Zheng was the master of this world. He did not need to look at it. He could see the end with a glance. However, his mind was deeply shocked by this scene. His vital chi seemed to be resonating with the seawater. It flowed out of his meridians and flowed to other parts of his body. Those areas were where the destroyed meridians were originally located. You're tuning into the Romantic Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.